Hello again. In compliance with Chapter 551, Open Meetings of the Texas Government Code, I call to order a regular voting meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Austin Independent School District for Thursday, February 27th, 2025 at 7:34 p.m. A few minutes later than we said we would be here. Thank you. A quorum of the board is physically present at the AISD Central Office to conduct this meeting. This meeting is being broadcast on cable channel 22 through Spectrum, Astound Broadband, and on channel 99 through AT&T Uverse. Closed captioning in English is available on these platforms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us again. Our next item is under the President's Report. Next week, the Board of Trustees will start important community conversations across the district. This is part of our Lone Star governance work. It is called Board-Led Community Engagement. The conversations are to share updates on student outcome goals as measured by our district scorecard and data about our district scorecard, and listen to your comments about the schools you're connected with and the district as a whole so we can better understand your experience in our schools and better represent your values when we make important decisions for the district, and really understand your response to the data and how we can share that effectively with you. We will hold 8 community meetings over the next 2 months, and our first meetings start next week. While we would be holding them based on vertical teams, every meeting is open to the whole community, and every meeting will have at least 2 trustees in attendance to hear from our students, staff, and community. The first meeting will be with our Austin High vertical team and will be held at O'Henry Middle School cafeteria on Tuesday, March 4th from 5:30 to 7. The next will be with our Navarro vertical team held at the Padron cafeteria on Wednesday, March 5th from 5 to 6:30. The week after, we will hold our Travis vertical team meeting at Travis Early College High School's cafeteria on Tuesday, March 11th from 6 to 7:30. And we'll have one more meeting before the district goes on spring break. That will be Wednesday, March 12th at the Eastside Early College High School cafeteria from 6:30 to 8. And then we'll have additional meetings following spring break and into April. So we hope you can make it out to one of our meetings. And our next item is committee reports. We've posted the written committee reports as an attachment to this item on our board docs agenda, and it includes a committee report for the Austin Education Fund. And the next item is our superintendent report.
Thank you, President Boswell and Board of Trustees. I want to start by highlighting some student accolades from the past month. Congratulations to Austin High School's Ballet Folclórico, who participated for the first time in the Bailes de Mi Tierra competition at St. Edward's University. This 3-day regional competition features students and professional dance groups from across Texas and neighboring states. Austin High School brought home multiple trophies: intermediate duet, first place; advanced duet, second and third place; intermediate trio, first and second place; advanced trio, first place; beginner ensemble, first place; intermediate ensemble, first and second place; intermediate small group, second and third place; and intermediate large group, second place. What an incredible showing. Congratulations to all these talented dancers for their dedication and amazing performances. Look at those trophies down there. That's pretty impressive. Cool. Congratulations to our student athletes who competed at the 2025 UIL Texas Wrestling State Championship. These athletes gave it their all and represented our district with incredible pride. Here are the results from the past weekend's state meet. Matthew Brock from Anderson High School finished second place in the boys' 120-pound weight class. Michael Holcomb and Aiden Solis, Ethan Frost, and Braden Colos from Bowie High School made it to the second or third round in their weight classes. We're so proud of these student athletes for their hard work and determination. Just absolutely incredible. You can see them right there. Keep it up. Now, this is impressive. I am so proud of the Navarro Early College High School Green Teens who recently took action to clean up Lady Bird Lake. These dedicated students removed 38 bags of trash and recycled from the lake 2 weeks ago. Thank you to these incredible students for their hard work and commitment to keeping our environment clean. That sign looks pretty hard to like how did that even get there? So yeah, that's incredible. Ann Richards, Young Women's Leadership Academy. School for Young Women Leaders, a middle school and high school stars archery team qualified for the 2025 Texas National Archery School Programs State Tournament next month in Belton, Texas. 2 of their middle school teams and 1 high school team will compete against hundreds of schools from across the state. What an incredible achievement. Way to go, Stars Archery. Best of luck as you represent our district at the state tournament. Okay, this student accolade is so impressive. Liliana Harris from Covington Middle School was named the Youth Art Month Billboard Design winner. And this means she will have 10 billboards up in the Austin area with her art. So be on the lookout in March. Her art will be displayed for the entire month. I got to go visit her at Covington, and she even signed a copy of her artwork and gifted it to me. It'll be in my office, hanging proudly. Liliana, we are so proud of you. Congratulations. She's also in like everything at Covington. Like she's in fine arts, she's in theater arts, she's incredible. Her friends were there supporting her. Just great to meet. And I believe next year she's wanting to go on to Austin High. Aiken's Early College High School Saxophone Ensemble was selected to perform at the Texas Music Educators Association, the largest national music convention in the country. They played a 30-minute program at the Henry B. Gonzalez Convention Center in San Antonio. Congratulations to the following student members: Nicholas Tejedor, 12th grade, Yoridia Colin, 12th grade, Jose Pedraza, 11th grade, Raquel Guerra, 10th grade, Isaac Alberto, 10th grade, Hector Santivanes, 10th grade, Angel Garcia, 10th grade, Yezeiraya Machado, 10th grade. What an incredible honor. We're so proud of these students for representing Austin ISD at this prestigious event. I wanted to highlight a group of students next that are helping me with my 1992 Chevy truck. Yes, this is my daily driver for those that ask me all the time if it's true or not. I dropped it off a few weeks ago to the career and technical education students at Northeast Early College High School to work on it. They're going to have it for probably 2 months. It needs a lot of work. If you see me driving down the road, there's like usually paint flying off it. I was so impressed by the auto and body shop classes. Students in these programs are learning automotive basics, collision repair, and refinishing, and even earning industry-based certifications. I'll keep y'all updated on how these talented students bring my truck back to life, and my wife will certainly appreciate it. So next, I am thrilled to share some exciting news from Lively Middle School. Lively Students Engineering Team has been selected as one of the 60 winning teams from across the nation for NASA's 4th TechRise Student Challenge. The STEM competition offers 6 through 12th graders the opportunity to design and test innovative solutions for space exploration and Earth study. Winning teams will receive $1,500 to build their experiments, a flight box for their designs, and technical support from future engineers. Lively's team will work with professional engineers to prepare their experiment for a NASA-sponsored flight test on a high-altitude balloon operated by Worldview. We are so proud of these students and excited to see their work come to life. And this concludes my superintendent's update. President Boswell.
Thank you so much. A lot to celebrate. Awesome to see. Thank you. I was so busy listening, I didn't turn my pages. Here we go.
Yeah. President Boswell.
Yes.
I just, in celebrating all of the amazing student accomplishments, I did capture a name there, Aiden Solis, and I just wanted to give a shout out to our ACPTA president, whose son is one of our wrestling state performers. So.
Oh, okay.
Good catch. Thank you. I love that. Thank you.
Thank you for calling that out, Trustee Kaufman.
All right. Superintendent Segura, can you please introduce our next item?
Absolutely. Thank you. Tonight we have Dr. Jacob Reach, Chief Officer of Governmental Relations and Board Services, to share the update regarding Agenda Item 4.2, Notice of Intruder Detection Audit. Jacob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Boswell, Superintendent Segura, and Board of Trustees. So the Texas Education Agency has conducted intruder detection audits at 15 schools since we last met. This was during January and February. At least 4 schools in Austin ISD failed to meet all standards during those. As of February of 2025, a total of 67 campuses, about 60% of all of our campuses, have been audited by TEA. TEA is required to audit 75% of the district by the end of the year. Last school year, TEA conducted intruder audits at 100% of our campuses. So as a reminder, the individual reports for each school are uploaded in the executive section of this agenda item and are available to trustees. In addition, we can discuss anything that may be protected due to security issues in executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees, any questions at this point? Okay, we'll have an opportunity to discuss it later if we wish to. Okay, our next item is a budget update.
Thank you. Thank you, President Boswell. I'd now like to welcome up Ms. Katrina Montgomery, our interim chief financial officer, who will join me to share the budget update tonight.
Hello, President Boswell, trustees, and Superintendent Segura. Today, we're going to have an update on our budget. So the first few slides we're going to look at today is going to be just kind of like a background of where we've been. In the first section, you see compensation packages. And so what we did here is we went back and looked at the last 5 years of how we've given compensation packages year over year from 2020 through 2021. And the year we want to point out is 23-24, where we did a $64 million compensation package. And the reason we wanted to point this out this year is because this is the year that we gave a compensation package expecting that we get additional funds from the legislature, and we didn't, but this was one of the largest packages we've passed over the last 5 years. And then if you go to the far right, there's stagnant state funding. So we all know there's been no increase in basic student allotment since 2019. And then we've received unfunded mandates, which is HB 3. And then to the bottom left, you see 24-25 decreased revenue. So our homestead exemption went from $40,000 to $100,000. Property value growth with TCAD, Travis Central Appraisal District, went from 6% to 1%, which you remember, if you remember the slide with the red, it showed 78 and how we went to 92 million. So that was the $14 million decrease in revenue. In SHAR's revenue, we've talked about this a little bit, but we did, when we did our initial report, our cost report, it showed that we'd received $16 million in revenue, and that's what we budgeted for. And the number ends up being $4 million because of ratios that have since changed since we did the original cost report.
And Katrina, before you move on, can you explain a little bit more about kind of SHARS, what it is, and kind of why the difference in how we budgeted? It's something that's kind of an ever-evolving thing, but I think it's worth explaining a little bit more in detail.
Yes, sir. So then we've had lots of issues with SHARS, and it's not just an Austin ISD thing. SHARS, the numbers have been changing. There have been audits over the last few years that have gone back 5 or 6 years where they've asked for revenue that they've given us to come back in return. So what SHARS is Medicaid. It's our reimbursement for anything that we do for our students. So the biggest piece would be transportation. If we have a monitor on the bus, there's all kinds of ratios that we receive in reimbursing to the district for Medicaid services provided.
And those ratios have been reduced.
Yes.
That's, I think, the main point here.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then 24-25 additional costs. We just want to keep talking about this. We've kind of talked about special education contracts. So far, we've given special education an additional $16 million. Instructional materials, service center repairs, and technology operational software. So what we're trying to look at this slide is just kind of like lay the foundation of where we're going next. So underfunded programs, we presented this last time, but we wanted to bring this up again. The blue sections are funding from the state, and then red is the AISD budget. And so you can see you have CCMR, dyslexia, but some of the biggest places where we see a difference between state funding and our AISD budget is in transportation and special education. We're very clear that we have some work to do with special education in making sure that we're serving our students the way that we need to, but we have to reduce our reliance on contractors, and we've talked about that. Like, that's one of the biggest things we have to do. And then you'll see at the bottom there's a total that shows state funding is $126 million for these areas, and that we have the AISD budget projected at $261 million. So there's a difference of $135 million.
Yeah, and I think one thing to point out here is, these costs are were included by design. They were brought in over the last, decade or so, and were meant to address a need or to do things that align with our values. And so I just want to make sure that the percent differences has been something that we've seen historically. And many of these increases in cost against what we're funded with is really a function of us just kind of doing what we think is right for our students and for our staff. And so I just want to make sure that that's clearly stated before I continue on.
Yes.
Thank you for allowing me to say that.
Budget challenges for 24-25 and 2025-26, growing fixed costs. We're all, payroll is going up, utilities, our property insurance. We've talked about our uncertainty regarding our property values. We've had another meeting with Leanna from Travis Central Appraisal District, and she's still saying that there's going to be a property value decline. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in detail in a slide. Enrollment and attendance impact. The current climate, is our enrollment going to take a hit? And if our enrollment is impacted, how does that impact our ADA? Increased competition, vouchers, like what happens if vouchers are passed? How does that impact our enrollment? And decrease of federal funding for Title I, II, and IV. So when we're thinking about doing the budget for next year, we're looking at all of these things so that we can make sure that we pass a budget that clearly shows we've estimated the revenue as closely as we can so that we can do a balanced budget. Current political climate, executive orders, inflation growth, estimated at 20% growth since 2019-2020 year, and unfunded mandates from previous legislation. So again, this slide is just helping us make sure we're all clear about some of the challenges we're faced with when we're trying to produce a budget for 25-26. And so other Texas district strategies. So this slide is to just show what's going on with the state. There's other districts that are facing deficits and are having to make designs or strategies of how to move forward and reduce their deficit. So we want to be clear on this slide. This is not an Austin ISD issue. Austin ISD is not the only school that's having deficit issues. But what we will talk about on the next few slides is the $110 million deficit is something that Austin ISD, that is just for us and something that we have to work through. But you can see here you have Aldine ISD considers closing 7 schools. Northwest ISD has decreased faculty staff, full-time faculty and staff. Socorro ISD is proposing a 300 employee layoff, student-teacher ratios. And so these are some of the things. The one that we found out about today, which was very interesting, was Fort Worth ISD is considered closing 26 schools. And they are having a projected declining enrollment. So again, this is not something that is just unique to Austin ISD. Our balance, our number is unique to Austin ISD, but this is not an Austin ISD only problem. So now we want to talk about understanding the urgency. So we've kind of laid the foundation. And when we understand the urgency, you guys have seen this slide, but this is our cash flow slide. We haven't gotten all the way through 24-25, so we didn't update this. But what this slide is showing is the blue numbers are our inflows. And you can clearly see in January and February is when we get the majority of our tax collections. And so this is why we're able to go talk to our bankers, because right now we're flush with cash. So we can go talk to our bankers and say, what are you going to do to give us the best interest rates? And then you can see the red is outflows. And in August of 2023, you can see that's where the biggest of money, the largest pot of the largest amount of our money goes out. And then that is because of the recapture payment as well as property insurance. And then you can see when we get to November of 2023, cash gets really low. And so in November, every single year, our cash gets really low, and we're monitoring it. Before AP goes out, before payroll goes out, I'm asking to see those so that we can make sure that we're going to meet payroll and that we're going to be able to pay our vendors on time. So when we look at this slide, I want you to look at November of 2023, but most importantly, I want us to understand that for everyone that's listening, this is our savings account. right? And so one payroll is approximately $33 million. So that's $66 million in 1 month. If we get down to $53 million, that means we can't make both of our payrolls. So we really have to start being strategic about what we're doing with our fund balance and keeping our reserves high.
So summarize that. Payroll per month. So just, I think because you did it, because how we pay out, it's bi-monthly. I mean, but if you could just say per month,
Yes.
what our payroll expense is.
Yes, per month. So we pay on the 15th and the last business day of the month. Per month, each payroll cycle is approximately $33 million. So if you do that twice, that's $66 million a month.
Per month. That's right.
So projected budget for FY '24-25, I know you guys know these numbers like the back of your hand. Lakeisha's like, if I see this slide one more time, right? So projected budget is $78 million. And so that was where we adopted the budget. And so then now the projected deficit is $110 million. And what we need to talk about, and we've talked about this the last board session, is doing everything we can to get that projected deficit from $110 million back to $78 million. And just to refresh, a couple of reasons why this is important. One, the administration wants to make sure that the board is clear we're not just spending money anyway. And we also want to do what we told our community. We told our community we'd stay at $78 million. So if you look at, when we did the projected adopted budget, it was at 17.2%. If we do nothing else and we end up 24-25 with the $110 million deficit, our fund balance would be at 14.7%. And so what I want to be clear is kind of tie it to the previous slide when we looked at cash. When you're looking at cash, that was rough. That was us being low at 20%. So every time our fund balance goes below the 20%, that's just going to make cash and making our payroll and making our accounts payable that much harder. So closing the gap, this is the sheet that this is a good sheet, and the reason is because it talks about our deficit is $110 million, and again, we want to make sure we can do everything we can to get back to the deficit that was passed by the board in June, which is $78 million. So that means this fiscal year, from July of '24 through June of 2025, we need to cut an estimated $32 million in addition, and when we do that, that'll get us to 17.2% fund balance. So we're still not at the 20%, but we're much closer. So we're going to talk about some of the things we're doing to get to to reduce the $32 million. So going below 20% fund balance means just a few key things. Risk of insufficient cash or payroll and vendors, we've talked about that. It impacts our financial integrity rating systems of Texas, which you guys know as FIRST rating. And then it also impacts our bond ratings. So now we want to start talking about what has the district been doing to reduce the deficit. So if you look at this is at our administrative cost. The TEA standard ratio is at 0.0855, and this standard ratio, this administrative cost ratio, is a part of our FIRST rating. And if you look at 2020-21, you can see where the number was at 0.0868. 21-22, it increased a little bit. 22-23, it was way over the TEA amount. And then 23-24, we have reductions, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. You can see we were right above the number, not too bad. And then for 24-25, our projection is that we're going to be far under the TEA standard rate. So what we're showing with this is that we're still making progress, right? This is not going to be an overnight success, but we are definitely going in the right direction to reduce our administrative cost. And then for FY24, here's some central office reductions and savings. So last fiscal year, the team worked and reduced the deficit by $32 million. Those are reductions and savings that were talked through last year, but they impacted this fiscal year. And this fiscal year, we had another $34 million. And so I'm sure you guys all remember the $34 million where we talked about $25 million and then the $9 million between implemented and projected. So that's the $34 million. So this fiscal year, we've had reductions or savings for a total of $63 million. And that $63 million is revenue of $7 million. And some of these things are still projections. So revenue of $7 million includes $5 million of interest. We're going to go do better than we had said when we built the budget, and then additional $2 million for our average daily attendance. And then we have non-staffing at $21.3 million and staffing at 34. So this slide, we're just trying to be clear about what we've done. We want everyone to be clear and have an understanding that we're not where we want to be, but we have started to make progress. We are moving forward. So FY 24-25 strategy, some of the current strategies, we passed the VADR, which we were all very excited about. We just talked about interest earnings, making sure that our interest earnings, that we're earning the highest possible rates. And then operational vacancies. So any positions, Christine Seamport and her team, there were 55 positions that were open. There was no one in the seat. We collapsed those positions. ESSER 3 supplanting, insurance contribution hold. These are things we've talked about. Division reorganizations, attendance initiative, and contract efficiency. So this is where I've been spending a lot of time with the team this week, is looking at contract efficiencies, looking at the same contracts or same software that is in one campus versus another campus, and looking at how we can reduce, and what is this contract saying, and how can we possibly, and what are our outcomes. So this is where we've been spending a lot of time, and purchasing deadlines. So those are all the strategies you're all kind of familiar with. Now, some of the new strategies. Monetize property. The goal is that the board will make decisions this year and the cash will be impacted in 25-26 fiscal year. Regulate spending. So let's talk about this one. So we've been going around talking to teaching, learning, and leading leadership. We've met with the principals, we've met with district staff, and what we've asked is that everyone do their best in controlling their spending. What we're finding is everyone is not quite doing that. People are increasing their spending. So one example is some campus reached out to buy 60 boxes of paper. So what we want to be clear with is, if we don't reduce the spending, we have to get back. Remember, we want to reduce that $32 million. So if our spending doesn't reduce, just the way we've talked about it, we're going to have to do a spending freeze. We need to make sure that we're trying to reduce the $32 million this year. We don't want to roll $110 million into our deficit. Hiring freeze, and so this excludes special education. And one other point that I want to be clear to bring out, that some of my peers have talked to me about, this hiring freeze is for this fiscal year. So it's July 24 through June of 25. So I know Brandy and her team are going to start going and recruiting, but they're recruiting for next year. This is a hiring freeze for this fiscal year, so we can reduce the $32 million. The other thing I want to say is this excludes special education. And the reason that is because we have to reduce our reliance on contractors. So Chief Hosak has been working with special education to talk about how can we put more positions into the budget so that we can reduce our reliance on contractors. So that's the hiring freeze. And then we're going to start reviewing overtime for approval. Overtime has to be approved by a division chief or assistant superintendent, so that we can make sure that all overtime is being monitored in advance of the overtime being worked. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Reach.
All right, I want to provide a little bit of a legislative update, especially to our district's budget, both at the state level and the federal level. So first, I'd like to cover 3 bills that are currently on the move in the Texas House and Senate, and which will most likely have significant impacts on our local budget here in Austin ISD and our future budget planning. Before I read them, I want to give a thanks to my colleague Edna Butts, because I am actually taking the language for House Bill 2 and House Bill 3 from her weekly legislative update that members of our community can sign up for by emailing edna.butts@austinisd.org and asking to be added to that. She sends it out every Friday. It's a great place to get legislative updates dealing with public education in Texas. So House Bill 2, which I actually found out just when this board meeting started, will have its hearing next Tuesday with invited testimony, and then next Thursday with public testimony, is the bill from the House that would increase education spending, public school, and make changes to the public school finance system. So it would spend $3.2 billion to increase the basic allotment by $220. So that would go from $6,160 to $6,380. This 148-page bill focuses on multiple things, including teacher incentive pay, teacher preparation, special education, and a lot of other funding programs and funding allotments. Some of the provisions that I want to highlight include $1.8 billion to increase special education funding and transition to funding based on intensity of services. So instead of funding based off of a SPED category, they would fund based off of the intensity of a service that a student receives or needs, which we believe is a much better model for overall SPED funding. It also provides $1,000 for special education evaluations. Both of these were priority 1 and 2 from the Texas Commission on Special Education Funding in 2022. And so we are thankful that these items are in there. It would also increase outcome bonus related to CCMR for students receiving special education services. The bill also includes $1.1 billion to provide a significant increase to the small and mid-size allotment. AISD would not benefit from that because we are considered a large district. However, we recognize that for our small and mid-sized district counterparts, they have some needs that are unique to urban and suburban large districts, and so we recognize why that's there. It would also increase the compensatory education allotment by roughly $32 per student, which would be a significant increase for Austin ISD. It would also create a fine arts allotment of $51 per student or $102 per educationally disadvantaged student in average ADA. And they've set aside $15 million for that. That is actually a cap of $15 million. So if the number of students exceeded it, then that number would actually decrease proportionally depending on the amount of money that they have available. So not quite a weight as we normally see it, but still an increase that could benefit AISD in our fine arts programming. 2 other items in here that I want to mention is it does require districts to hire certified teachers for courses in the foundation curriculum beginning in the 26-27. So the student could not be uncertified or out of certification if they were in a core subject. There would be a 1-year exemption for courses other than reading and math, so science and social studies. It also expands eligibility for pre-K to special education students and funds pre-K programs administered by Texas Workforce Commission, which we do partner with and could help us both with our Travis County pre-K partnership, but also our overall pre-K work. So we are still working through what this would mean necessarily for Austin ISD. We do hope to have better information tomorrow on how this could affect Austin ISD and what that would mean for our overall finances, and we will share that in a future update. So HB 3 is another bill that is moving in the House right now, and it is the Education Savings Account Program. So at a high level, the House bill differs from the Senate bill in that the House bill is universal. It does include homeschool, but the dollar amounts are a little different. So the House bill would be a voucher based on 85% of the estimated statewide average state and local funding per student. So they are basically pegging it to ADA. Based off of current rates, that would be a $10,198 voucher per student. So actually a little bit higher than the Senate's voucher. It also would allow students with a disability to basically receive their weights instead of just a set voucher. That is capped at $30,000, but that would mean that they could significantly get higher than that $10,198. It also includes $2,000 for homeschool students. And then the last thing that's really different in the House bill compared to the Senate is that the House created a stronger prioritization order. And so briefly, they prioritize $1 billion over 2 years, so $500 million a year. And any students who qualify under one of these 4 tiers would go into a lottery. And as long as they have enough money, they would keep moving down tiers until they're out. So the first tier would be students with a disability and a household income below 500% of the federal poverty guidelines. Next would be students, any student with a household income below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. Then it would be any student between 200 and 500%, then any student 500% or higher. And to give an idea of what that means, in 2025, 500% of the federal poverty level is $105,000 for a family of 2. It is $160,000 for a family of 4. For that same time period, 200% of the poverty level is $42,300 for a family of 2, $64,300 for a family of 4. So just to give an idea of what that would look like. Another bill that actually just got passed is Senate Bill 26. And as a reminder, I shared earlier that both the House and the Senate had set aside funding for public education, just about $5 billion. They were slightly different. What was different was that the Senate did kind of earmark all their funding for teacher raises. And so Senate Bill 26 is kind of the funding bill that would say, here's how we're going to spend that money. And that bill recently passed out of the Senate with unanimous support from all senators. And at a high level, what that bill would do is provide $5,000 for each classroom teacher who has at least 3 years but less than 5 years of teaching experience, and $10,000 for each classroom teacher who has 5 years or more of experience in districts with 5,000 or fewer students, or $2,500 for each classroom teacher who has at least 3 years of teaching experience but less than 5 years of teaching experience, and $5,500 for each classroom teacher who has 5 or more years of experience in a district more than 5,000 students. So that's the portion that would apply to Austin ISD. If you're between 3 and 5, that would be an increase on your existing salary of $2,500. If you're greater than 5, it would increase $5,500. One thing that I do want to mention is that this would require future appropriations. You know, it's not meant to be a one-time bonus or anything similar to that. It is meant to be a pay increase, but it would require future investment from the state to continue. A couple other things I want to mention on Senate Bill 26. It does add teachers to the list of who is eligible for free pre-K. So if a teacher has a student, they would automatically be eligible, similar to the other eligibility provisions. And then, of course, that would include funding that we receive for that from the state. The bill also would increase the teacher incentive allotment amounts, and it would create a brand new designation that's a new entry-level designation that they call acknowledged. And so that's an overview of 3 bills that are on the move that would have strong effects on AASD's finances. I want to move over to the federal government because we also had a lot of news there this week. The House actually passed their spending bill. The Senate had already passed theirs. So both of them have passed those. Those are their budgets for the upcoming year. Now they will need to work together to create a resolution and then start reconciliation process. So they need to basically, it's like a conference committee. They need to come together and decide, okay, how are we going to work out these 2 spending bills to determine what we're going to bring forward, and then, assuming it passes, what goes to the president for approval. So that should take some time, and so there is still a lot of unknowns with what this could mean. Also, the House and the Senate do things a little bit differently than our state. They typically say, here's 10 years worth of funding. Now, they're still doing budgets for the fiscal year, but they spell it out as 10 years. So you'll commonly hear that this budget would increase X by $100 million over 10 years, or this would decrease Y by $100 million over 10 years. So then you have to sit there and think, okay, well, that would mean they're talking about 10 million this year. So looking at that and looking at what was in the House version and what was discussed, we have seen some things that we really want to bring up because it would directly affect Austin ISD and other school districts in the United States. So some things that were heard, right now the House bill would look to cut $330 billion over 10 years. So that would be about $33 billion every year. And some things that they have discussed to accomplish that, again, there's no final language, could be potentially a 25% decrease in title funding, and that would be all title funding, not just Title I, Title 1, 2, 3, and 4, excuse me. Also, decreases to the National School Lunch Program, which would potentially, one way that they've said they would address that is they would change the community eligibility provision to be a higher percentage. So right now, you can qualify at 40%. One thing that was suggested was they would change it to 60%, which could mean that we would have less campuses that qualify, and then we do not receive that wall-to-wall free breakfast and lunch in that classroom. We would have to go back for those, depending on how the final language looks, potentially to where these schools that are 60 and above, everyone gets free breakfast and lunch no matter what. But at the other schools, it's only those who qualify for free and reduced lunch. The other students would move back to a paid system. Again, these are not final. Other things that have been said is that there could be some changes to Medicare and to Medicaid, which could affect SHARs. However, I would mention that the current House bill does not mention any changes to Medicaid or Medicare. However, it does ask the department that oversees that program to cut about $800 million in year one. And so some pundits have looked at that and said, well, you know, their big expense is Medicaid and Medicare, and they have X amount of dollars for staff. So you get into some difficulty to where if you cut all of that, then you don't have staff and you won't have programs anyway. Now, if you only cut some of the staff, you have to cut somewhere else, and that could lead to cuts to Medicaid and Medicare. So again, it's a cut to the department, so the department would help build their own budget. But we have heard that some things that could be changed through that could be a further reduction for SHARs, for instance, or a further reduction for how the state receives some support. All the states, not just Texas, receive some support for their own programs that they run. And so that's something else that we want to look at. There's a lot of other cost-saving measures that they address that don't necessarily affect our local budgets, but could affect our college and career pathways. So I want to mention one other item that was brought up that may not apply to Austin ISD directly, but it certainly does indirectly, and that's changes to some of the federal student loan programs. That's another thing that's been discussed. Reducing the number of programs and getting rid of the SAVES program is a popular program of the last couple of years, which is a federal student loan program. It is possible that that could see cuts. So that may not hurt our budget, but it could hurt, for instance, our CCMR outcomes, because it could lead to less students qualifying for financial aid and potentially not choosing college as their next pathway, even if they were interested in doing that. So we'll learn more as that reconciliation committee meets and comes up with a final budget, where we should then get better information on what would that mean for public education and the Department of Education. Back to you, Trina.
Thank you. So with all the information I went over and all of the information that Dr. Reach just talked about, this is Joshua Gion's brainchild, and I really like it. It says, accepting our new identity, right? And so like we need to start thinking about how do we do that. One of the things we talked about is doing a balanced budget, which means our revenues equal our expenditures. We don't overspend, we live within our means, monetizing property, and programming. So what we were trying to do with this slide is to be very clear. All the things we want to talk about for the next year will fall within these three buckets. So our stable state. So one of the things our superintendent asks is like, what is our stable state? And so we've done this on this document. If you looked at FY 24-25, our adopted budget, but then let's look at our projected budget. And so what this slide is saying, if you look under FY 24-25 projected, is our stable operating expenditures for now would have been approximately $867 million. And what we know is that we have operating expenditures over that. So that's why we have have a reduction needed of the $110 million. And this document here assumes no additional state funding. So with all of the information that Dr. Reach just provided us, until we get until everything has passed, we're not going to include any of that information in our projections. So again, we want to talk about here how our financial indicators look. Our first rating, we know we have a superior first rating. We have the highest bond ratings that the district can receive: Moody's, Fitch, Kroll, and S&P. And then we also have other awards from ASBO and GFOA. And the reason why we wanted to show this slide is because we wanted to say that even though we have this deficit, the district is still getting awards and doing very good with its stewardship. And then projected budget for FY 25-26. So from this point back, everything we've talked about has been for 24-25. And we want to be really, really clear that we're talking about 2 years. And so that's where it can kind of get a little bit confusing. So everything we've talked about previously is FY 24-25, and now we're going to start talking about FY 25-26. So if you look at FY 25-26, and remember, it's very early to project these numbers, but if we have 0% property value growth, we're saying that our revenue would be $1,645 million. Our operating expenditures would be $965 million. Our recapture is estimated at $785 million, so we'd have a deficit of $105 million. That's is if there's zero property value growth. And we know that TCAD, Leanna, the chief appraiser, is saying it could be between 9 and 13%. So we also did the calculation if we land in the middle, which is an 11% property value decline. And if you look at that, you can see our revenue obviously would have decreased, right? Our operating expenditures, right now, we would hold those if those stay consistent. Our recapture number would decrease, but then our deficit would increase to $121 million. So this is kind of where we're trying to run different projections. If we stay at 0% property value growth, the estimate is that we'll have a deficit of $105 million. And then if we go to 11% property value decline, that would leave us with a deficit of $121 million. So the one thing I want to talk about is we don't have the numbers, we don't show you if the property value growth actually becomes 13%. And if it does, that would just increase the deficit. So under the 0% property value growth, you can see that our fund balance gets as low as 3.8%. And I know we're all very clear that we can't do that. And then the 11% property value decline would get us to 1.1%. So although if you go back and look at presentations from previous years, it always said FY 26-27 would be the year that the district would run out of funds. This is also where we have to start looking at for next fiscal year, 25 through 26, how would we make it all the way through the year, right? Because remember, that's why we were laying the foundation when we looked at cash. In November of 2023, we only had $53 million. So if in 25-26, so we have two things that we have to look at. 24-25, we need to reduce the $32 million so that we don't roll $110 million into our deficit. And for 25-26, we cannot run either one of these numbers, whether it is 0% property value decline or growth, it stays consistent. We can't roll the additional $105 million into our deficit, into our fund balance. So this is what this slide is trying to be really clear. We have two opportunities in the front of us. 24-25, reducing the additional $32 million. 25-26, where it depends where our property values lie. Is it going to be the $105 million at 0%, $121 million at 11%, and then if it gets to 13% decline, that number would obviously increase. The deficit would increase. So our stable state for FY 25-26, if we look at the second column, the 0% property value growth says that our stable state is we should produce a budget with operating expenditures of $860 million. And right now, if we leave it consistent where we are, it's $965 million. So again, it's just different ways to show this. We need to reduce our budget by $105 million. And then if it's 11% property value growth, it's exactly what you just saw. It's just a different way to show that we should have an operating expenditure budget of $844 million, and that means that we have to reduce our budget by $121 million. Again, this assumes no additional state funding. So timeline to budget adoption. So let me go back to this slide. The stable state of FY 25-26. If FY 25-26, that's where we're going to dive into that in the workshop this afternoon. So that's why we didn't spend as much time as we did on 24-25, because 25-26 is where we're going to start talking about that in our workshop this afternoon. So timeline to budget adoption. Today is February 27th. We're going to have our workshop this afternoon where we're going to talk about how do we take the budget and get that to equal outcomes. March 1st, hiring begins, and remember that's for 25-26. The hiring freeze is only for this current fiscal year, 24-25. March 14th, if we don't get a control of our spending, we will proceed with the spending freeze. June 2025 is when the board will adopt the budget. And July of 2025, that's when we will start launching the budget. I want to go back to June of 2025 and talk about this is where we do a balanced budget, and we're also going to do it a little bit differently. One of our budget strategies is going to be a little bit different. We're going to reach out to our chiefs, and they have to review their budget and say, yes, this is the budget of which I can live within these means. And the reason that's important so that I'm not here again next year telling you, oh, we increased the deficit by $52 million. So it's going to be a partnership between the finance team as well as our chief saying, we're going to give you $100. You've agreed with that you can live within $100, and that's what we expect you to do. So these next few slides, I won't go through them. These are some of the engagement opportunities. I know it's very important to the board that we're getting out. We're meeting with anyone who wants to talk to us about the budget. I mean, we're talking to teachers, we're talking to principals, we're talking to staff, we're talking to the community. There was a great conversation on Saturday, a community session. Chris has said that his bus drivers want to hear about the budget, so we're going to go do that. We have a meeting on Monday with our bookkeeper. So we're really getting out so we can make sure that our staff as well as our community is coming along with what we have to do for this next fiscal year. And then, are there any questions?
Thank you for all of this, the work and the information, both of you. And we do have a budget retreat after this that we're going to ground in student outcomes. Ashley Paz is going to be here to kind of get us launched. So we'll have opportunity for questions later, but I also want to give opportunity for anyone who wants to have questions now, if that's important, or we can move on. Trustee Singh.
I'm sorry. I just had one question, which was regarding the fund balance. And so I know our board policy states that we have to have 20%. So I guess my question is for the superintendent and maybe even our board counsel, which is, do we need to make any formal change to our policy, or do we have to have a formal vote to say that, like, we as a board would agree to go below our own violate our own policy and go below that 20%?
Yeah, I would say you could handle that a couple of different ways. You could either, you could change your policy, or you could, in adopting your budget, if you find that you're in a position where you're not going to be able to adopt a budget that is consistent with the standards set in policy, you could just include that, in your motion, or make that as a finding when you do it, and that'll authorize it.
Okay, and would it impact our first rating?
No, I don't think it should. Just the mere fact of having a policy expectation for a 20% fund balance and deviating from that, the policy aspect of it wouldn't.
What about the actual monetary aspect?
So the monetary aspect, yes, we actually spent time today going through that, which is why we added that slide around what is the impact of a 20% fund balance if we go below it. So nowhere in first rating to say 20%. What it talks about is the number of days of cash on hand. And it is one of the things that they look at as part of it. So yes, we would expect an adverse impact if the 20% barrier is broken.
And is there any way, it seems like the administration is recommending just taking us back to the $78 million deficit. which is, I think, what was it, 17.8,
17.2.
so 17.2% in fund balance. So is it accurate to say that's what the administration is recommending at this point?
I wouldn't say this is a recommendation. I think, so whatever we pick up over the next several months will inform where we end up on fund balance, right? Which is why it's restricting funds versus freezing funds, which is why, the tighter the controls, the more that we'll pick up. And so we just closed January financials, so we still have a good amount of runway. I wouldn't say that it's a recommendation. I would say that it is more likely than not that we will, with all the controls in place available to us, without doing something severe, we will go below 20%.
Okay, and
So
then,
recommendation, it's just the change that would be required to get there is more than I think that we can take on to get all the way above it, with 3.5 months left.
okay, and yeah, that's what I was trying to get to. Is it feasible at all that we could have a scenario where we could remain at our 20% fund balance?
We can create a scenario. I think if, in the work session, we can have that conversation around, what we come back with. If the board would like to see, a scenario that keeps us above, I just want to communicate that it's going to be, it'll be aggressive. It has to be because of the number of months we have left. Go ahead, Katrina.
Yeah, so Trustee Singh, so the 32 million to get us to the 17.2%. If we want to get to the 20%, it's an additional $33 million.
Yeah, okay. Well, we can talk about that some more, but I think from what I know right now, I would like to just see what a scenario would be, particularly if it could impact our first ratings and other financial factors that are important to us. But, that I would be curious. We can talk about more with the rest of the board, of course, and see. I'd be curious to see what my colleagues think, too.
And I think it's important to hear from the board however it gets communicated to the administration, which areas would be explored to get to that, right? Because there are multiple avenues, and that I think is important to hear as well.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you all, and thank you so much, and we will see you again during the retreat. So thank you. So we now move to public testimony for items on consent. Members of the public wishing to participate in the public testimony portion of our meeting called a dedicated AISD phone line in advance of the meeting to sign up to speak in person or to audio record their remarks. And tonight we do have 4 people who left recorded messages. And we will now play those recorded messages for public testimony. So please listen carefully.
Kathy Kurris, President and CEO with the Greater Austin YMCA, regarding support for the office space lease with the YMCA at the AISD Central Office. For more than 50 years, the Greater Austin YMCA and Austin ISD have partnered to serve the needs of students, families, and AISD staff members with early education, after-school care, and summer day camps. Through our Project SAFE program, we've also provided water safety and fitness education to more than 10,000 AISD students for free since 2010. And we've helped hundreds of AISD staff members lead healthier lives through memberships and healthy living programs. We commend Superintendent Segura and the AISD board for their willingness to think creatively about new ways to collaborate and leverage our collective strengths. The opportunity for our YMCA team to work alongside AISD leaders will surely generate new and innovative solutions to some of the biggest challenges facing our community. We look forward to getting started. Thank you.
It's Marie, parent. I'm calling on 12.2 and 12.3 expressing concerns about the proposed contingent fee legal services agreement. There is no publicly available information or proposed contract for this agenda item, making it impossible for the community to understand its implications. Transparency is essential, and there is none here. Austin ISD is in the middle of a major budget crisis, yet legal fees have been astronomical. Every dollar spent on legal costs is a dollar taken away from classrooms and kids. One of the firms, Thompson Horton, has a history of escalating fees at all costs for its own benefit. Their approach is fiscally irresponsible and directly contradicts AISD's stated vision and values. A district committed to student outcomes and responsible stewardship should not be funneling money into the pockets of lawyers known for prioritizing litigation and profit over students. I urge the board to table a vote until there is transparency, to reject any agreement with Thompson Horton, and to limit the astronomical legal fees in Austin ISD. Kids first.
Hello, my name is Lisa Flores, and I'm calling about items 12.2 and 12.3. I'm concerned there's no publicly available information or proposed contract for item 12.2. As a member of the Budget Ad Hoc Committee, legal expenditures is an area of concern for me. The totality of legal expenditures was not clearly shared with the committee, but there was a focus on the budget only of the department. As a member of the Coalition for Special Education Equity in AISD, we have rallied many times for more transparency around legal expenditures for years to no avail. I would like to add my direct lived experience has guided my assessment that members of Thompson and Horton are more focused on billing taxpayers than any measures that could center child-centered resolutions within the dispute resolution process. I ask you vote no to items 12.2 and 12.3. There are other legal firms that with more ethical practices available. Thank you. Good afternoon, trustees. My name is Lisa Flores, and I'm calling about item 10.3. It is a revelation to see a bid and contract for the installation of cameras for almost $500,000. I'd like to remind the board there was a public vote to approve bond funds to install cameras in all eligible special education settings. It is nice to see there is a framework and providers to make this happen available, and it would just take a vote from the board to make the bond promise happen. The district would save money in making this happen at the early build stage in the new builds instead of retrofitting. The CVOC has unanimously voted that this happen in their recommendations to the board. I therefore respectfully ask that you put it on a future agenda item and vote yes to these security cameras. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our public testimony. Trustees, are there any questions or clarifications? I have a quick one about the legal fees. Do you have anything you care to share about that?
Kenneth Walker, General Counsel, would you like to come up and share what you can regarding the legal fees?
Good evening, Superintendent, President Boswell, Board of Trustees. So to speak to items, I think 12.2 and 12.3, that is an engagement that we're asking the board to approve in to participate in multi-district litigation. If we were to pursue this, there are no out-of-pocket legal fees. The arrangement would essentially be a contingency fee arrangement. So if there was success in any pursuit of this litigation, which resulted in a monetary outcome in favor of the district, then a portion of that through the contingency fee arrangement will go to the firms for the services that they provide in pursuing the litigation on our behalf.
Thank you.
So can I just clarify? So this is to join an ongoing litigation. This is not for them representing us in any other extra capacity or regular district business.
That is correct. So this particular item will be limited for this particular engagement and this engagement only, and that's with respect to the multi-district litigation.
Okay. Can we go into a little bit more detail, just quickly, what that is for the people watching? Because I don't know that everybody's aware of what that lawsuit is.
Sure. So the lawsuit is a public lawsuit, and it has been going on for quite some time, but it is against several social media companies and school districts across the country, and now in Texas are looking at possibly joining the litigation against social media companies. So, I mean, that's the extent of it. I mean, I can get into some more of the specifics, but I mean, generally, I think the allegation is that it's causing harm to students, which is also affecting school districts because of the children that it educates. And so we're articulating in the lawsuit some amount of harm that we believe there should be compensation for school districts.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Appreciate that.
I have one quick question. So from a budget perspective, would this would be no expense and only possibly revenue generating. It would not possibly be an expense to the district. Is that correct?
That is correct. No out-of-pocket expenses are being paid to pursue this litigation. And it will be, if approved, and it has to go through an improvement by this board and also by the AG, because contingency arrangements have to be approved by the Attorney General before they can actually be pursued. So there is multiple steps of approval that need to occur. But yes, there is no out-of-pocket expense, and it's purely a contingency fee arrangement.
And the only possibility would be either zero or revenue generating. Those are the only two possibilities from that.
That's correct. If there is no success in the lawsuit, there will be no out-of-pocket expense to the district.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more? All right, thank you, Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. As a reminder, please feel free to share any general comments or questions on non-voting items with the board by email at trustees@austinisd.org. And we now move to the consent agenda. Trustees, are there any consent items anyone would like to pull for a separate vote? All right, Secretary Gonzalez, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, I move to approve items 7.1, items 8.1 through 8.2, items 9.1 through 9.7, items 10.1 through 10.6, item 11.1.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Trustees, is there any discussion on any of these items? Trustee Foster.
Briefly, I noticed that we have under Business and Finance, items 9.3, 0.4, 0.5, and 0.6, resolutions to basically accept funds from the governor's office. And it's great to accept funds from the governor's office, but it's also worth noting that in the absence of adequately funding a school district such that it can live into its vision, one of the things that will be done for us, if not to us, is to provide sort of carrots for certain behaviors. So we have a resolution to accept bullet-resistant shields, grant for those. We have a resolution to accept rifle-resistant body armor. We have a resolution to accept state crisis intervention grant funds, which I like. We have a resolution to accept juvenile justice and truancy prevention grant funds, which I like. But in all cases, what we have is the state sort of indirectly dictating through these wonderful grants. Bullet-resistant shields, when we have, 80 or so school shootings over 100,000 schools. Every school shooting is horrible, and yet there are other ways to spend our money that more directly impact outcomes than bullet-resistant shields. So, I'm not going to raise anything more than to just point out yet another way in which there is something that I would call irresponsible in terms of how we are incentivized and directed and pushed and bullied into living into a vision that may or may not be our own vision. And I think the public should be aware of these little bitty items that come at us like bullet-resistant shields as opposed to more funding for counselors.
Thank you, Trustee Foster. Any other comments or questions before we
Just a quick one.
vote?
I'm sorry, for 10.6, having the YMCA lease space in central office, I just want to thank our superintendent for making that happen. I know that was not an easy lift, but definitely indicates that, the district is willing to think differently about our own properties as we enter more financially strained situation, and how wonderful that we get to partner more closely with the YMCA if this passes.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I rode the elevator with some painters who were leaving last night after being there getting the floor ready. So yeah, exciting to see. Thank you. Any more discussion? All right, having a motion by Secretary Gonzalez, a second by Trustee Quintana to approve consent agenda items 7.1, 8.1, and 8.2, 9.1 through 9.7, 10.1 through 10.6, and 11.1. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes unanimously. We will now move to items for a separate vote. Trustee Gonzalez, do I have a motion to approve item 12.1?
Yes, I move to approve item 12.1. Do I need to read the full title of it?
do.
Okay, yeah, 12.1, termination of professional employees during a probationary contract.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Trustees, any discussion?
Are we not holding those votes till after the closed session where we have an opportunity to ask questions? I have no questions. I am fully in support of this termination. But by our process we discussed, are we not going to hold that till after we have an opportunity to ask questions during closed session?
I think we can, I thought we wanted the opportunity, but not necessarily to use it, was my understanding. But if we want to do it the other way, I think we can.
Let's hold that. I mean, I will retract that request. I am fully in support of this, and I have no questions about it, but I would like to discuss our protocol.
Let's discuss that protocol so we're clear. And it is on, these will, going forward, always be items for separate vote. So do we want to go ahead and vote on it? How are we feeling? Okay. Okay.
Trustee Boswell, I do have a question.
Yes.
Is it not already on our executive session agenda? I haven't seen that, so I didn't know if it was on there or not.
We have room for personnel issues on our agenda, correct?
Yeah, personnel, it can be discussed under personnel under 551.074.
Oh, so we can we discuss the procedure also under that?
You can get legal advice about how you should.
Okay, then.
Could act, yes.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Perfect. All right, having a motion by Secretary Gonzalez and a second by Trustee Quintana to approve item 12.1, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Secretary Gonzalez, do we have a motion to approve item 12.2?
Yes, I move to approve item 12.2, consideration and adoption of resolution approving contingent fee legal services contract, including findings needed for submission of contingent fee legal services agreement and request for expedited review by the Texas Attorney General.
Is there a second, knowing that you do not have to repeat that title?
Second.
Thank you. Trustees, any discussion on this?
I just want to clarify one more time. In terms of our district's investment of time or money into this case, there is minimal investment of time and zero investment of dollars. Is that correct?
Zero investment of dollars, minimal time. And if it's time, it'll be myself and Kenneth, and we're already working 80 hours a week, so.
And we would be joining an effort to hold our social media companies accountable for the irresponsible and negligent approach to addicting our children to their phones and to social media apps to the detriment of children, as we saw in Senate hearing or in congressional hearings a couple years ago, where social media companies were face to face with families who had lost their children's lives, had lost their children's health and well-being with harmful practices by these companies. We would be joining a lawsuit that would be holding our social media companies accountable for the responsibility for our children's health and well-being. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Having a motion by Secretary Gonzalez and a second by Trustee Quintana to approve item 12.2, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes unanimously. Secretary Gonzalez, do we have a motion to approve item 12.3?
Yes, I move to approve item 12.3, consideration and adoption of contingent legal fee services agreement with Thompson and Horton LLP, Island Bond NPC, and O'Hanlon, DeMrath, and Castillo PC.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, trustees. Any discussion? All right, having a motion by Secretary Gonzalez and a second by Trustee Quintana to approve item 12.3, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you all. So we will now recess our open meeting at 8:48 PM and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.0821, and 551.071. We will perhaps finish with the executive session. We will return to have an open meeting for a workshop with the Lone Star governance and process grounded in student outcomes. We may split our executive session depending on how quickly we move and how long it takes the new configuration to get set up. So thank you, and we'll see you in a while. We will now reconvene the open meeting at 9:46 PM. Welcome back. The board has moved to the floor for our Lone Star Governance Budget Alignment Workshop, where we'll be talking about student outcomes. And tonight we're joined by our Lone Star Governance coach, Ashley Paz, on Zoom. We'll have Ashley share with us about aligning resources and student outcomes, and also receive a presentation from the administration. Ashley, thanks for being with us, and can you kick off our presentation tonight?
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to.
What's that?
I said, I'm happy to. It's good to see you tonight.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Great. Well, I'm going to get kicked off right away here. So just to introduce the work that I do, Lone Star Governance is a continuous improvement framework that's grounded in this idea that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. What this suggests is that adult behaviors, namely those of school boards, actually have the potential to impact improving student outcomes. Now, we have research on effective educator and administrator behaviors that go back decades, but it's really only in the last 15 or so years that we've begun to amass a meaningful body of research on effective governing behaviors. And this is where I'm going to focus my attention with you all tonight. So there are some governing behaviors that have a greater impact on creating the conditions for improved student outcomes. As long as we've been working together, you all have heard me repeat time and again that school boards exist to represent the vision and values of the community. But what does this actually mean? So first, if the school board is going to represent the community's vision and values, it has to do the work of actually listening to the community's vision and values. You have to go out and do the work and hear what your community has to say, ask them what it is that they want students to know and be able to do. And you've already talked about this tonight and some of the work that you have coming up in that regard. So next, after you've done that work of listening, you then take what you've heard and you write it down in the form of goals and constraints into your district scorecard. This then becomes your the North Star for everything that the board does. And this is how you ensure that the community's vision and values are woven into all of your decisions. The next step is that you begin to monitor progress so that you understand what kind of growth is being made in the district, how the vision that you have for students is aligned with the current reality that they're experiencing in the classrooms. And then finally, this last behavior, it's the one that we actually don't talk about as often, but it's the one that you actually engage in the most every single time you come together as a board. And that is aligning resources. The way that the board aligns resources, either through policy or the budget or budget amendments, facility decisions, really all of the decisions that you make are getting you closer and closer to actually accomplishing the vision and honoring the values that you've codified into policy through your scorecard. So what does this actually look like in the budget process? And how does the board interact with this? So the first step is in planning. The board's role in planning for the budget is simple. You adopt the goals. You adopt your scorecard, and that turns into the North Star, like I've already said. This is how you ensure that your community is represented throughout everything that you do. Next, you're going to do a draft review. After the superintendent, the district has done some work to prepare, the board should sit down and actually have an opportunity to review and discuss the budget prior to whenever you have to do a final adoption. That's partially what we're doing tonight, and what you also do every time you receive a budget update from the superintendent in your board meetings. Now, this is an important step in the process. If the board doesn't like what the superintendent's draft says, absolutely discuss it, have a conversation about how it is aligned, how maybe it's not aligned, and then don't approve it. Expect the superintendent to come back and make a stronger case for how the budget is becoming more aligned with accomplishing the vision while honoring the values. But it's critical that the board not engage in the process of actually selecting the input, selecting the things that go into the budget. Providing input, yes. Providing guidance, absolutely. But when the board steps over that line and begins to actually say, here are the things that you have to do, superintendent, it makes it very difficult for you to hold the superintendent accountable, and it undermines your ability as a board to continue to have grow that trusting relationship with your community. And so after you've had that draft, you've reviewed the draft, the superintendent comes back and then they convince the board how is this actually aligned? To be clear, it's the superintendent's job to convince the board that there is alignment. It is not the board's job to be convinced. This can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable, but it is never particularly a comfortable process, especially in this year. And you've already talked about how it's not necessarily specific to Austin, but there are districts all over the place that are having to make some really uncomfortable, difficult decisions related to their budgets this year. And it's also not just, well, I'll just leave it at that for now, but it's never an easy process, but the easier process comes when you as a board actually have something to ground the budget in, when you have done the work of saying, here are the priorities and given that direction, namely through your goals. Especially in this year, and you've already talked necessarily specific to Austin, but there are districts all over the place.
Ashley, I don't know if you can hear. I don't know if you're frozen. I don't know quite what's going on. Are you with us?
I am.
Okay,
I'm
awesome.
having some technical difficulties. Give me one second.
All good. We'll wait. Thanks.
You as a board. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I'm back now.
We're good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I'm going to start over, or I'm going to start with the next slide. Oh, actually, one more thing. So once the board has been convinced that there is alignment in the budget, the next step is for the board to just adopt the budget.
Are you with us?
finally, there's one final piece that I want to connect for the board, and this is something that I don't know that we have explicitly spoken about before, but because it is something that I am adding in for my districts this year, because there are so many decisions that have to be made that are not going to be fun. And that is really helping the board understand what is the difference, what to expect when having to make the difficult decision of what to cut in your budget. So the process of aligning your resources is inevitably going to surface how much has already taken place within the organization. Some of these activities will be seen to align with the accomplishment of the goals, and others will not. It is going to be important for the board and superintendent and senior managers to understand that some of these things will need to be abandoned and some things will need to be redesigned. Strategic abandonment and standard of completion are not interchangeable concepts, but they are both concepts that are grounded in freeing up resources so that you can become more aligned with your scorecard, with creating the future that you intend for your students. So strategic abandonment is sunsetting an entire, full initiatives. We're saying that this is something that is no longer serving our district, or this is something that we are just going to set aside for now. So that is where you get rid of an entire initiative. Standard of completion is where you may hold on to pieces of it, but you're really just either increasing or decreasing expectations regarding that ongoing initiative. Again, both of these are ways that the district, these are things that you can expect to hear from your district in terms of how you may or may not need to make some difficult decisions not too far down the road. All right, we've already discussed this. And so finally, the big question that I'm always getting from boards, how are we actually going to know? How are we going to know if there is alignment? And the questions are pretty straightforward. Do any board members have evidence that the budget is does not address the accomplishment of any student outcome goal? That's the first question. The second is, do any board members have evidence that the budget violates any superintendent constraint? If you have a pretty solid reason to believe that the budget is going to accomplish both of these things, then I say go for it. You can rest assured that alignment is present. If you have evidence, maybe it's not as strong, but maybe you want to go ahead and approve it. You can do that. It really is the board's decision on how to move forward, but these are kind of the two guiding questions that I encourage boards to think through when they are trying to ascertain alignment. And that is the end of my presentation. So I am happy to turn it back to the board and answer any questions.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate that. And trustees, there is a PowerPoint to go with that too that has the questions and other pieces in it. Do we have any questions for Ashley? Excellent. All right. Ashley, thank you so much for being here with us and for sharing all of that. And thank you for sending the books as well. We have them here with us, so I appreciate your help. Okay, so what's next?
Yeah, so President Boswell, I'll kind of introduce the workshop and then hand over to Katrina Montgomery, our interim Chief Financial Officer. So we are here in a budget workshop or retreat to really discuss some of the potential impacts regarding future cost reductions. We just had a presentation that Ms. Montgomery gave kind of outlining the urgency around the work that's ahead of us. And one of the things that we are wanting to think about as we move through this work is, where does AISD need to be, in their near future, but also long-term, to where, future risks have largely been mitigated. When we talk about, our new identity, safe harbor, what is the new kind of balance of Austin ISD that will help us ensure that we're providing the highest quality public education possible in Central Texas. And so that is the lens that we're starting this work from. And so with that, just as we go through the presentation, I want you to know, once we get into it, and after Ms. Montgomery kind of intros it, you'll see different items, and we'll continuously align back to how those items may be impacted, how they may impact adversely the goals or constraint progress measures. And so you'll see some kind of dialogue back and forth. Just I want you to understand kind of our line of thinking regarding how we assess them. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Ms. Katrina Montgomery to take us through the first couple, or through the presentation.
Hello, once again, thank you for being here this afternoon. So we're going to go through our budget workshop. So the board, we met earlier this year, and we gave the board gave us some guardrails for us to stay in alignment when we're looking at reductions. So we're just going to go over these. There are 5 of these board guidelines. The first one is to ensure cuts in any area are equity driven. The second one is consider the long-term impact of cuts and reductions. The third one is ensure the teacher's voice has been heard in the decision. The fourth is center literacy, aligned to student outcomes. And finally, listen to the people impacted before cuts are final. So the objective for this afternoon's workshop is 1, understand impact on academic outcomes, consensus on the budget urgency, accepting our new identity, understand new strategies, presenting strategies to resolve the projected $105 million deficit. And remember, that's with 0% property value growth. And agree on balanced budget strategy for fiscal year 25-26 as well as 26-27. So we talked about this earlier, accepting our new identity, having a balanced budget where revenues equal expenditures. So that means if we have $5, we only spend $5. Whatever we bring in is the exact amount that we spend. So that means we will not pass a deficit budget. Monetize property, and then programming. So for FY 25-26, we have talked about these strategies, but we just kind of want to continuously level set where we've gone, what we've already done so far. So for 25-26, we have an estimated $20 million in proposed reductions. Master schedule efficiency improvement is approximately $2.5 million. PEMS reform, $1 million. Reconfiguration of transportation routes, $2 million. Contract evaluations between teaching, learning, and leading, special education, and technology, $10.5 million. Graduation Prep Academy, $1.5 million, and then other, which equals $2.5 million. So these are strategies that we've talked about in previous board sessions for FY 25-26. And now we're going to start talking about our new considerations that for FY 25-26, and then we're going to allow them see how this impacts our goals and our scorecard alignment. So the first one, one of the strategies we have, if you see this slide, this slide equals a total proposal of $23 million. So the first one is 7 of 8 secondary, and you can see you have goal 1 and goal 2. And goal 3, the half circle means that there's a medium impact on goal 3. And then I will apologize. I know Dr. Reach is going to print more slides. He didn't, everything didn't print. So if you were looking at the copies, he went to go print some more. But everybody has the presentation in the front of them? Yes? Okay. All right. Okay, so 7 of 8, and so you see goal 3 has a medium impact, goal 4 has a high impact, and goal 5 has a medium impact. And so then...
And just to orient the board, I want to make sure the board understands that, this was the determination of a medium, high, and low impact was driven by conversation within the cabinet leadership team. There's certainly opportunity to discuss, whether the determination is understood or agreed to. But I just want you to know that this is like kind of a first pass at it. We didn't want to develop anything numerically. It's really just trying to get a sense of the relative impact from based on a cut from one goal to the other. So it's really about relative impact more than anything else. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Yeah, I appreciate the trying to give it a strategy and a system. So thank you, and trying to quantify what's hard to quantify.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so then the 7 of 8 secondary, the estimated savings off if we proceeded with this will be $16 million. And then the second one is elementary essential areas. You can see that there's a high impact to scorecard goal 1 and 2, a medium impact for goal 3 and 4, and then goal 5 has a high impact. And then if we impact elementary essential areas, that has a estimated savings of $6 million. And then minimal staffing thresholds at elementary, goal 1 and 2 have high impacts. Goal 4 also has a high impact, as well as goal 5 with an estimated savings of $1 million.
And can you clarify exactly is that, a full librarian, a full counselor, a full?
So minimum thresholds, about 2 years ago, at the end of 2023, we, I think rightly so, said that smaller campuses would not go below 2 teacher allocations per grade level, even if the number of students could be consolidated into one classroom. And the idea there was we wanted teachers to collaborate. If a teacher was out, and a substitute came in, kind of that would, obviously have an adverse impact to the learning environment. So the strategy at the time was create a floor. And so what this is saying here is going back to the previous methodology of allocations. One thing I want to point out is that, these are not proposals at this point by any means, but I want to look at other considerations, which is the second to last column on the right. And it's really, really, really important to think about what are the things that would be impacted if these were to be considered. With this, the first two, especially with the loss of planning time, would mean that a lot of the work that we did over the last 2 years, would likely not have been accomplished. The work around MTSS, all the professional development around the TA agreed order, the kind of alignment that we've seen as a system, that would not have been, we wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have that protected planning time. And so, for us, when we think about it, removing this would have a huge impact on the academic and learning environment. And we know for sure that these other things would be at risk also. And most importantly, the TA agreed order top. So I just want to kind of, that's how it's kind of, these charts are kind of laid out, so you can kind of see it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just would ask if you could just provide a brief summary of a brief explanation of each of the strategies. It would be more helpful than reading what's written.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, so 7 out of 8. So right now, currently, for high schools and almost for secondary, really, we have a 6 out of 8 schedule, which creates a protected planning time. Most school districts in the area run 7 out of 8, but we do know that like Lake Travis runs a 6 out of 8 model. They were previously 5 out of 6. And so what this is suggesting here for this cut or for this reduction is to take that planning period back and then build the master schedules around it. And so what you would see at scale across the entire district is a total net reduction in needed positions. Now, because of attrition and everything else, we wouldn't see that same number of staff transition, but it would be a fewer number of allocations needed by campus. For essential areas, this is a change really reverting back to the model that was prior to 2022. So for those of y'all that were around at that time, actually at the time they were considering going to 7 out of 8, the decision was made at that time to create a protected planning time in elementary. And that planning period has proven to be very, very valuable to us, just to ensure alignment with PLCs, introduction of special education. This would be reverting back, and so that protected planning time would not be in that schedule. I will say that there are other alternatives, with there's ABCs, there's different ways that we could do it, but we didn't want to have, 5 or 6 iterations of one model in this table. What we're saying is, hey, like this group of potential reductions has this impact. If we want to explore it, how might you differentiate that, or how might you refine it, and so that's kind of what we're talking about there. And then we just talked about minimum threshold at elementary just a moment ago with President Boswell. Is that helpful, Trustee Coffin? Kind of going through that process? Okay. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Can I ask, so if I'm understanding this correctly, the overall result, I mean, these are all staffing reductions?
These are all, so they would reduce the number of staffing requirements by campus.
But so, because I guess the part I'm trying to tie to is, there's 16 million, 6 million, and 1 million. That's a huge difference between those. So is the amount of staff affected?
Correct. Well, the amount of positions, yes.
Required to meet.
Yeah, I always use staff and positions differently because
sure.
I think people, when you say staff, it's implying there's a person there.
I gotcha. So my question with that I guess that the way this is reflected is tough to see the amount of, I guess, the labor burden shift with these cuts or with this realignment, because what I'm curious is that with the 7 to 8 and that much savings, I assume that means that that's a significant change in the amount of staff required for the content delivery, but it's the same amount of content. So the burden increase on the staff is going to be a lot higher, whereas on something that's just saving the 1 million, that seems like clearly.
That's a good assumption. Yeah, assumption, because it's a function of the number of positions.
Right. Well, so I think it would, in planning this, and I understand this is, we're just going over a perspective,
yeah.
But to make that type of decision, it would be helpful to see what the burden increase is going to be as far as how much more content per staff would be expected, if that makes sense. That might be one way to look at it. Because since, I'm just, again, looking at the numbers, but, if the savings is 16 million, then I assume the burden is much, much higher.
Well, it's also a much larger group of schools impacted. So when you look at minimum staffing thresholds at elementary, those are not many schools have that threshold. So it's very, very, very few. And so I would have to really think about the methodology to build that out. But I think I know what you're kind of getting at. How do you communicate where the burden transfer occurs in each of these, and who it does occur,
right?
What changes?
And so then related, on the other end of that, you're saying that at the elementary level, it's a much smaller level of campuses affected, and yet that's the most high degree impact is what we're projecting. But is that high degree of impact actually spread across as many campuses?
So that's where this is where it becomes really nuanced, right? Because it's not across as many campuses. So we have 78 elementary schools. I would expect,
It would be reflected at every elementary, because for the elementary essential areas, it's additional teaching assistants. So it would be a decrease in the number of teaching assistants. At the high school, for the 6 of 8 to 7 of 8, that would be teacher positions. So it would be a decrease in the number of teacher positions.
Yeah, and then I was thinking about the thresholds for the last one. So that would be it'd be different, be less.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying for future consideration, it would be, I think, an additional metric would be helpful to gauge the impact.
And so to Jacob's point, the middle one, elementary essential areas, every elementary school is impacted. For the minimum staffing thresholds at elementary, that is a handful of elementary schools. We didn't scale the impact to the scorecard. You could do that. I just would have to think about a methodology to do it. And I didn't know that was appropriate kind of in this discussion, but I think it's something we can maybe discuss moving forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that. Thank you.
Yeah, but I appreciate the idea of the number of students impacted. I think that may be just a metric, because I think it's an interesting, another data point. Trustee Gonzalez.
Thank you. To kind of, I guess, continue along the line that Trustee Deodioste started about the disparity, the impact of some of these strategies that have been suggested. When I look at the equity audit, or I guess organizational transformation audit in Newspeak, that we had done, one of the recommendations in the resource allocation section was about hold harmless provisions for under-resourced schools. And so I guess when we're talking about these strategies, 7 out of 8 or essential area redesign, is there or would there be nuance to the implementation of that strategy, or would the application be universal across all campuses?
I think that's where it gets into, based on what we hear, how it gets implemented. Because I think one of the things that we're looking at is, and we've talked about it earlier today, would you break out band 1, band 2 for certain, adjustments, regardless of what the adjustment is, and then not do it for band 3 or 4? Like, 7 out of 8 could be an example, or whatever example. You don't have to run every high school using 7 out of 8.
So are the projected costs that we have here, the estimated savings, are those if the strategy were applied universally?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, that goes back to the comment around each one of these has like 8 different variations that you can run on it. And we've thought through a lot of them, but it doesn't kind of distill down as something that can be kind of walked through. So the idea here is let's figure out, as we get input, kind of where to take the next step, and the ones that we think need to progress, then we kind of introduce that level of granularity and refinement. Because at the end of the day, like we're talking about here, these would make it harder to deliver some of the things that make it hard to protect the quality of education in Austin ISD. Like, I don't have another way to say it. Like, that's what it is. And so as we go through them, we're only on the first sheet, but the idea is you have to look at all of them and then say, okay, which ones, are we going to consider as you move forward before the next? So, that's why, as you go through it, we'll kind of see the buildup of the numbers, and then we make a decision.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If I may. So when you talk about the different bands that will be affected, there are still Title I schools in Band 3 and 4, correct?
Yes. Band 4, I don't know
Or
about Band 4.
in Band 3?
Oh, Band 3 for sure, yeah.
So when we are talking about things like instructional coaches, which I assume is a part of one of these on here, no?
No, instructional coaches are paid for using Title I dollars, and so that is not part of this. That is a different, that's not in these 3 line items.
Okay. So when we were talking earlier about instructional coaches, I think it was Dr. Wilson, and about the budget and having those tough conversations, where does that factor into this?
So we introduced instructional coaches 2 years ago. We had them kind of sporadically throughout the district, but there wasn't a commitment to pay for them across all the schools that needed it. Like, schools are really trying to go on their own to actually pay for them. So we brought them in 23, 24, and as Title I goes down, because it did go down this year, we lost 19 instructional coaches, so we have 40 left. Those 19, if we lose Title I dollars, then they can only be paid for with some other funding source, which is likely to be 199. So you'd have to make up that difference somewhere else with the cut in order to make those remaining instructional coach positions whole. So that's where it kind of gets all kind of tied together. That's how it's connected, but they're different funding sources.
I'm sorry, just as a point of clarity, we didn't have any ICs that was all federal dollars?
So in the beginning, there were some instructional coaches, but they were sporadic. Like, I think Blazer had a couple. They weren't by title. They were just, the campuses chose to when to invest. Some campuses didn't have the dollars to invest. And so what was happening at that time is we were seeing a lot of dollars left over at the end of the year from Title I that was unspent. And so the decision was made from 23 to 24 was to take those funds and use them for instructional coaches at the start of 23-24. And we had a rollover amount that helped us get to where we could pay for really we actually had 59, I think is what we had. And so since then, because Title I has gone down, we don't have the ability to carry them on title dollars anymore, which means the only way to carry them is on a different revenue source, which is most likely 199. So yes, before 2023, I don't know what the number was, Trustee Foster, but it was a fraction of what we have now. And that was really the importance of addressing first teach and tier 1 instruction. Like that's the connection.
And if I can clarify, because I think it was before you were here, they were scattered around some districts. Some schools would trade FTEs, like teaching FTEs, to have instructional coaches. So there were non-Title I schools that also had them and used them to support teachers, to mentor new teachers. But I think there was also a feeling that they weren't being used effectively everywhere. So there are a lot of schools that lost them that would love to have them back. But that's been eliminated as well. And now we're losing from, and I think the focus was to have really high quality, really well defined and trained instructional coaches at our highest need campuses. And now with the Title I changes, that is rolling back. So I think we've gone backwards twice now.
Yeah. And this strikes me as hopefully this isn't too theoretical or too high up. This strikes me as an area where district central leadership, in terms of a theory of action and saying, okay, if we have instructional coaches, we see them having this impact, here's how we use them systematically, thoughtfully, and then there could be a case for investment if the levers work. If we apply these levers this way, then we will get this impact. But we're clear that the scattershot can't work in these moments. But it still strikes me as an open question in terms of our theory of action going forward in the context of these cuts. How do you, this goes to Trustee Hunter's question earlier, if not instructional coach, then what? And there still has to be a then what.
Well, I think that's why as you get to the table, we have to figure out what cuts can be done that protect the educational experience in Austin ISD. And I believe that instructional coaches are a big part of that. But we can't just move them to 199 because then you just made this number, instead of 110, it's 123. Oh, no, sorry, 113.
So do we want to keep going through the
Yes.
table and then circle back and talk about all of this? Does that work? Yeah, and I think, this is exactly, we said we would ground this in outcomes, and I think talking about, we just heard in our 2 hearings how important instructional coaches were, and that was part of our conversation, and now to hear that that's something that budget changes are requiring us to cut. This is exactly what we're facing, so I appreciate the conversation. Okay.
So the next slide is campus budget allocations. So this has a few different things. So campus software evaluation, finance and technology are partnering together to look at all of the software at campuses to look at the spend. And when you're looking at the spend, we're also going to see how does the individual softwares, if they're duplicate softwares, how would we look at that? We're also looking at usage, how frequently are the softwares being utilized as well. So you can see Go 1, Go 2, Go 3, Go 1 all the way through Go 5 has a medium impact. And so right now that is an estimated savings. We're saying TBD, to be determined later, because we're still in the process of evaluating all of the softwares for campus. And then there's a strategy campus non-staffing funds, which is 10%, which means you would reduce campus non-staffing by 10%. We know that that will impact all of our our scorecard alignments from 1 through 5. And if you just take a flat 10% off of all non-staffing, that'll be $868,000. So to what Trustee Gonzalez just asked about, we also did this if we only impact band 3 and 4 schools. So then that would still have the same impacts to go 1 through 5. It'll be a high impact. And then the estimated savings for that would be $407,000. And then leveling for staffing and non-staffing. So one of the things Chief Hosack does is a snapshot, which I believe is in October. We do leveling where we go back and look at where the staffing was given based on enrollment. But we've never done that, and she makes adjustments, but we've never done that for non-staffing. So that would be something that we would look at. If enrollment is a little bit, if we've given non-staffing based on a higher number than the actual enrollment of the campus, we would go back and impact the campus's budget.
We do level before snapshot.
Before snapshot? Okay. Thank you. And then the teacher attendance initiative, the reason this would be a reduction is because we could possibly reduce our substitute costs. And so this will impact goal 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but this should have a positive impact because we're going to incentivize our teachers to have higher attendance. When we feel like when our teachers are there in school, that's also going to impact our average daily attendance as well, which is how the district will receive additional revenue because that's how we received our funding. Chief Hosack is just starting to work on this attendance initiative. So right now we have estimated savings at TBD.
And there are other school districts that do this.
Yes, there are.
This would not be, we would not be the first. But I think one thing that is interesting that was shared with me earlier in the week is there's a correlation between when a teacher is out and when the students are out.
Mm-hmm.
And so to the extent possible at scale, incentivizing, if you can create a model that incentivizes teachers to perhaps not take that Friday off, then you're likely to see a correlated, but maybe not equal, increase in attendance that day for that classroom. So just something to think about as we move forward.
Thank you. And if I could, I don't know if we're going to use this kind of system of communicating in future presentations, but if we believe there's going to be a positive impact, it would be nice to have some kind of different notation.
Okay.
Like
We
a
can
different
definitely
color or something. I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
I feel the same way. Yeah, we'll get that.
Mm-hmm. And then to move, the next strategy is to move some nurses, not all, from RN to LVN. That would be adjustment based on the campus needs. And so that will have an estimated savings of $2.2 million.
And can you share what coordinated care is and what that, in the other considerations column?
Either Jacob or Brandy, coordinated care for LVN. Jacob actually gave the definition earlier.
So coordinated care would be like a long-term care plan for a student. So it would be above and beyond, what we may see quickly at what are they called, minute clinics? Like that would typically be the type of services that an LVN provides. But a long-term care plan with a student would be something that only a registered nurse is allowed to provide.
And how would we provide for that if we didn't have RNs? How do districts that don't have RNs provide for that?
So we actually discussed Rosedale as an example when we were talking this morning, where there probably is more coordinated care requirements. And so the thought would be that Rosedale, because of its unique needs, may still require a registered nurse. Why our elementaries I can't say for sure how they are, but it will certainly be more rare. So an LVN may be more appropriate. And then because an LVN does still need to work under at least an RN or a doctor, if it's more sporadic or not as often, perhaps that RN or that doctor can provide that coordinated care at some of our elementaries, for example, because it would not be all the time. It would not be something that was needed every day.
Okay, so it could be scheduled or managed a different
Yes.
way. Okay,
Obviously, every situation is going to be unique for every student, so we'll need to look into that. But that is what we believe.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Let me preface by saying that my aunt is a nurse. My cousin is a surgical technician. She's wanting to be a school nurse for a while, but they've had to be RN, so this will be exciting news for her. Okay, so let me start with that. I don't know who can answer this question. My limited knowledge as a middle school teacher, I basically don't send kids to the nurse because if it's just my head hurts, the nurse is not gonna do anything, right? They're gonna send them back to class. I keep frozen paper towels, so give them, that, and they're not gonna give them medication if it's not already in the office. I mean, they can hand you like sanitary products, menstruating people, but I think that parents feel more comfortable with an RN. But how many of our schools currently have just a shawl? Do we have that number? Because I know at one point, now my child is 22, but at one point I'm pretty sure the secretary at Maplewood was giving him his inhaler because they weren't allowed to carry it in elementary school. So not neglecting the work that RNs do, but how many do we have right now? Is every facility staffed with an RN?
No.
No. And where they are staffed with an RN, not where medically fragile children are, but in regular schools, like, has a needs assessment been done there? Because again, can't give you ibuprofen, can't give you, then call your mama, right? Am I wrong? I'm asking for help here. Somebody in this room.
I'll help you out. I don't
There's a lot of
think
people
you're
in this
wrong.
room. Somebody ought to know that. No,
So-
I can't give you nothing. That's a drug.
So 3 years ago, we attempted to move off the contracts that we had for registered nurses. Do you remember this came to the board? And it was meant to be a 3-year plan, where it was secondary year 1, and then we would do a 2-year phase out for elementary. So Jacob is right. We don't have nurses everywhere, but we budget for them everywhere. So I think, there was an assessment done before we started that transition. It's probably 18 months old now, but I think we have a decent understanding of the needs of each campus, at least campus type, that we can share, or maybe use to update. But that's the current strategy. But yes, we do have the budget, but we don't have them everywhere, which is one of the reasons we moved away from the contracts.
Yes, okay. So then I guess my final comment on that is the savings that we're looking for, or the savings that's like assigned to that change, is that what Andrew said before? Is that like everybody, or is it like strategically thought out? Okay, so it's everybody.
Well, so to Jacob's point, if a school had needed a nurse, we would provide the nurse. So I think that's where the tailoring comes in.
Okay.
It's really student need based, but I think as a whole, we feel pretty confident that we could reduce the number of required registered nurses. Because right now it's a requirement for us that we apply to ourselves.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
But yeah, so we would still tailor it. It wouldn't be by school type. It'd be by student need.
Okay.
And we would work with Elena to determine that.
Okay, and last thing, so when we were talking about an LVN needing to be under the whatever of a doctor or an RN, that was where there are medically fragile children, correct? Not just a regular school.
No, an LVN has to always be under the supervision of an RN or a doctor.
Pretty sure when I went to school, there was nobody else there but the LVN.
So to be clear, it doesn't have to be on site. That RN could be.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
Here in central office, for example.
Okay, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, but they have to be, accessible to them.
Semi-joking. I feel like telehealth could cover some of this. But do we not have telehealth?
I don't believe we do for our students. We do have it for staff.
Okay.
I have used it. It's great.
Okay, I'm just asking. And again, I'm just saying, like, my tummy hurts. I mean, I guess if somebody would have to fill it to, I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm not saying AI. I know some people have suggested that for human beings. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, are there things that we can do that would still get the job done without having, I guess maybe I am saying that, but I don't really mean that, so never mind.
I hear you saying this is something we should seriously consider.
Yeah. Human beings, We love them, but do we have to have them everywhere all the time? Don't we have traveling nurses, or am I making that up? Do we have nurses that share schools? Am I making that up?
I'm almost certain that we still do have some, but I would not
It
be
could be
able to
like
tell you how
Monday,
many.
you don't even have a nurse, right? We've seen it, perfect. Some of those will be our kids, right? Let the LBJ be like a clinic. Just,
Well, I guess it would be helpful too to have a real sense of what nurses are doing. Are they helping like students with type 1 diabetes take insulin shots? Are they like, what are nurses doing for kids with certain needs and some of our kids who have special needs that no one else can do? So that might be helpful going forward as we consider this, to really have that clarity would be great. Thank you.
Can I just ask clarifying though, kind of, I think to one of Trustee Hunter's original points was for the 2 million that you're projecting there, do we have an idea of how many RNs we'd be transitioning to LVN? Is that like 80% of the RNs that we currently have, 70%, 90%?
I don't know the number that was used to back into it. Do you have it, Brandy? Number of registered nurses to LVN ratio that was used to develop the 2.0 million?
That was just all in. If we were, I apologize for yelling. If we were to go all in RN to LVN, just that difference in cost savings, so it is not nuanced in that capture of the.
So it's net.
Okay, because I'm fairly confident that we do have students on campuses that
I'm
would
sure,
still
yeah.
need RNs, so the 2 million is,
That's at the high end.
yeah, okay.
All of, based on where we are in the planning process, like all of these things are
I
good.
got you,
Every one
okay.
of these will have that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we scheduled an hour, we're at 50 minutes. So I think with permission, we probably could use more than an hour. It's an important question, and I think the other thing we're seeing is that anything available to cut it's having impacts on student outcomes. So I think it's important to keep kind of having those conversations, or not every single thing, but a big majority. So I think it is a really important, rich conversation. So with everyone's okay, I think we can spend a little more time. These are student outcomes focused minutes because we're grounding it in that conversation. So are we all good if we keep going through the thing and give us some time? Do we want to say go an extra 30? That gives us 40 minutes to go? Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, Ms. Montgomery, you want to keep going?
Yes.
Thank you.
The next slide is other. So we're going to kind of walk this a little bit differently. So we have monetized property, which we've been talking about. Property insurance, that won't have any scorecard alignment impacts, but what we're looking at property insurance with our vendor is to see, is it possible for us to go self-insured? We've looked at our claims experience from the previous years, and so like last year, we paid premiums and there were no claims because our deductible is at $1 million. So we're looking at property insurance and what could we possibly do to have some reductions there. And then we have school consolidations.
Before you move on, so the last time we've had claims was Winter Storm Uri. Is that correct?
Big claims. That's
Big
when our larger claims were.
Yeah, so I guess the last time that the premium, the value of the protection actually benefited us.
The value of the claim was higher than the premium was Winter Storm Uri.
That's a better way to say it.
Yes.
So how much do we spend on the premium every year?
So this last year, we spent $6.2 million. The year before that, it was $6 million, of which we had no claims.
Yeah. So these numbers, so we're populating them, but as we get information, I just kind of want to give you an idea of scale. But that's a different step, right? To go self-insured, it's a different strategy, but we have enough historical information to say it's something we probably need to explore.
And would we get a Lloyd's policy for just like backup? What would we do if we had a situation where we had a Uri,
So we're talking about one, if there's stop loss, is there some kind of stop loss we could get one? And then two, we always still have FEMA. So like even with Winter Storm Uri, we're still waiting for $5 million from FEMA.
Yes, but we could get a stop loss,
Well, that's
perhaps.
That's what I'm talking to the
Okay,
carrier
thank
about
you.
now.
So
Yes.
yeah, I will look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you.
And just to be clear, the exposure on Winter Storm Uri, I mean, I think it was still in the $16 million range. From what I recall on the operations side, I mean, it wasn't like hundreds of millions of dollars.
No,
I guess
it wasn't.
it's all still relatively low. And that was a big, big event.
And it's hard to imagine in a place without earthquakes, a place without, that we could,
Yeah, but 6 million
Have
every year,
something.
6 million, I mean, you wait 4 years and, you get
Okay.
24 mil.
6 million
Thank you.
is going up, right? So this last year went up to $6.2 million. So it's the premiums are increasing every year. And there are other ISDs that are doing this. This is wouldn't be something unique or trailblazing for Austin ISD. TASBO has presented classes about how other school districts are doing this.
thank you for that. And it would be helpful to know who's doing it too. I think when we get a report about that, that would be
Yes.
great. Thank you.
Yes.
Can I just add one, I'm so sorry. When we're comparing ourselves to other districts, are we comparing ourselves to other districts with the same amount of students and staff?
Well,
Budget
just depends.
deficit?
I think if we're talking about property insurance, we need to look at someone who has similar property values as us, right? Who has the same square footage. That's what we would be looking for.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And so then the last one, we talked about this briefly, is a budget pre-reduction.
We didn't talk about school consolidations.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over. Okay, so school consolidations. So school consolidations, the Gibson audit had suggested school consolidations. And the amount that was given by Gibson, the Gibson audit was $43 million.
And we have not seen that audit yet, correct?
The board has received a copy of the audit.
But we haven't discussed, like, the public hasn't seen it.
We have not been able to
We haven't
schedule the
reviewed it.
audit committee meeting yet, but we are working. As a matter of fact, I met with Gibson today, and that was on our agenda for scheduling that meeting. So that would be step 2. And then we said that we would share with our committee.
Okay, so, but we'll review that like our other audits in a public meeting, and that part hasn't happened yet.
That's correct.
And so until we do that, I assume it's not okay to put it in board docs. We won't do that yet.
The Gibson plan?
Yeah.
Well,
Correct.
it's not a plan. You're talking about the audit.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the
Okay.
audit findings.
But we'll,
Yeah.
we'll have more for the public later about that. Yeah, okay.
I
And
really
can you
appreciate-
share about how many schools that represents?
So they actually don't call out a number of schools. They call out what they see as the difference in per pupil spending at campuses that they are below 500 and above 500, into what they believe would be a more efficient model of saying that all campuses should be above 500. So that's how they arrive at their dollar figure.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Ask one more question on how they came up with that. Are they talking about consolidating? Does that figure include not only the consolidation and the savings that comes from, reduced staffing? Does it also include the monetization of the vacated property?
Does not.
That part it does not.
Okay.
It does include overhead and items like that, but not, yeah.
Yeah, no monetization at all.
So I'm glad Trustee Singh, you asked about that, because that's also where we would have additional savings, right?
I have a question about how consolidation saves FTEs.
So the idea is, if you have a couple different ways. The first way is in the way that the students are distributed per classroom. So an example, if you have an elementary school that has 3 sections, and each classroom has 15 kids, 15 students, and you move to 6 and you consolidate with another one that had 15, then you could conceivably net out 1 teacher and have 4 of 22. Like there's going to be savings like that. There's also administrative cost. So instead of having 2 assistant principals or 2 administrative teams, you only have 1. The square footage allocation for custodial staff obviously is half. All the support essentially is reduced because the footprint is really the same. All the schools are around the same size, 65 to 85,000 square feet. So really it's administrative cost. That's really the big one. I would say out of all the costs that kind of become more efficient.
So I hear that savings in administrative costs. When we have that public discussion about what the findings are and should at any point that move on, I think for me, because I know larger schools that have 2 assistant principals, right? There's not a whole nother staff, so there is savings, but you still have to have, because you have like 800 kids in an elementary school. So like, if we have to get to that point, that's something for me that I would want to see, and just, it cannot, I would really prefer that the way it was done last time, that it not be done that way again. Because you can't just be like, you're close to them, y'all gonna be one school. Because that did not go over well at all. In fact, I was one of the crazy parents that said, hey, don't do that, just close my school. Because we could actually take that hit. More affluent parents, we could walk. I mean, I wasn't affluent, but I'm just saying, we could walk, we could do more than the school that was suggested was Campbell. So if it's between Campbell and Maplewood, I suggested go ahead and close Maplewood. But the combining, that was never gonna work. Like, we've been really fortunate with the combining that we did, but Maplewood and Campbell, that would have never worked, ever.
I think, based on input as we move through the process from the board, the question becomes, does the administration create the kind of criteria under which you would do, like, consider this? Like, to me, if this is something that we need to explore, which I think it's something that has to be considered, we need to have the space to talk about how we would do it before you even begin to do it. I think that was one of the things we also didn't necessarily do well last time. And so, yeah, I would agree with you.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And I think I have a further question where we're talking about potential savings for the coming school year, for the fiscal year that begins in July. And really have a question about how realistic this is something to even consider for a school year that starts in a few months.
Correct. So this is one that my expectation around this is, if it were to be following how we typically have done things, the process would be for primarily 26-27 school year. But, that's the process I would prefer to go through if we were to go through it, right? Which means that we would go in before the board in December of 2025 for the recommendation and the decision. We would develop the criteria through the spring of 2025, planning through summer and fall. But I think the reason it's here is because the reason that we had the comment off the dais, what would it take if you absolutely had to get to balanced budget by 25, 26? That's why, when I was talking to the team, does it come off or does it stay on? I think, it's to serve that purpose of talking about, okay, if you want to maintain 20% fund balance, you're going to have to look at something more aggressive, and this is one of those more aggressive things. Is that helpful?
It is very
helpful. It's just hard to say it's this or that. It's because of where we're at.
Well, I think that's the exercise we have to do, is just kind of put everything on the table and have those conversations. So I appreciate the chance to have it. Yeah.
So can I just want to, in the spirit of people tend to call out positives, I just want to acknowledge this at least as a positive in the context of somewhere there's a worst case scenario where we have to do crazy, extreme things. And so I do appreciate the spirit of what you're saying, is that you are planning in case something happens. We're not doing this completely flat-footed. And so that part I appreciate. Obviously, there's more discussion and more planning, and this is the initial thing. But I don't want to say I like that it's in here. I appreciate that it's in here for the planning purpose of knowing that we're looking at this intentionally. Because again, surely somewhere there's a number we hit where we say, well, we have to do things that we don't want to do, and we have to do them quickly.
Or someone does them for us.
Right. And I think that this planning is warranted in that context. Obviously, it's not something we'd want to do, but if it were to have to happen for whatever reason, I would want it to be something that we've thought about as much as we can before we do it. So thank you.
And I think, I appreciate that, Trustee Orioste. I think that last time when there was a process around this, we weren't honest about what it was. And I think here, we need to be honest about what it is in the beginning. And I think that's just, I think one of the reasons I wanted to make sure that I was in here for at least discussion purposes.
Yeah, I always appreciate knowing a worst-case scenario ahead of time, so it's worth acknowledging.
Did you have a question, Trustee Gonzalez?
My question, I guess, was just around the 500 enrollment threshold. I was just curious how many schools fall below that number. I was just looking through myself.
Oh, it's many.
But just trying to determine what it would be.
It's many, and that's why, we haven't created a number. There's no number that exists. The methodology that was used is the methodology that an independent auditor used. I think what we're just trying to demonstrate is to get to the scale of numbers that you need to close the gap. This is one of the things that you probably have to explore. I think that's really kind of and I think when they come up and they can maybe talk about the methodology behind it, but it's never going to be that line of demarcation is not going to exist in that way, that cleanly.
Just quickly, does school consolidation consider rezones at all, rezoning?
So a consolidation will effectively change a boundary, which is one of the reasons that it requires board action. Yes, but that's exactly, boundaries are a part of this. In most cases, it'll be fairly, I think, easy to identify where the boundaries are. But you're right, there could be instances where it's more complex than that, where you have really messy boundaries. So yes, I would say yes, but, and that's why it's specifically a board action. Budget pre-reduction, unless there's any more questions on the.
In budget pre-reduction, so what this would entail is that whatever we couldn't cut or have reductions for, we would take it off the top. So there's a slide that we're going to get to that's going to talk about the targeted amount, and we'll talk about more then about the budget pre-reduction. And that slide, it had TBD because it determines how many reductions we make, which would determine how much we would have to do the budget pre-reduction off the top.
So just to be clear, this is using the hammer and nail strategy. Right? I mean, we're essentially forcing the budget. I mean that's effectively what we're doing. We're saying, okay, we got to find 40 million. We're taking 40 million, normalizing it across all the budgets, and then you're going to reduce each budget proportionally. And then essentially it becomes, Katrina's and my task to do it for everybody. It's really a forced action. Mm-hmm. And I hate to use hammer and nail, but that's what it is. I mean, that's like, mm-hmm. we got to do it, and we got to do it now, and this is what we have to do. This is not ideal, not desirable, and mm-hmm. It can be done, but the lower the number, obviously it'd be preferred. If it's a large number, very impactful. Right. I just want to make sure everybody understands what this is. This is not anything simple.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't leave a lot of room for nuance.
No.
No. I mean, you really then are going from legally required and then closest to that, and just the further out you start going down.
Yeah. And I also want to just ask about the monetizing property.
Yes.
That's not a long-term, that's like a
correct
plugging the hole for a year strategy.
So thank you, President Boswell. That's exactly right. I think it's really important that whenever we talk about any of these things, our expenses have to match the revenue that we're generating. And we can talk about the nuance behind it, but generally speaking, that's stable state, right? Where we can pay for and live within our means, given what's going to come our way. The monetization helps us short fund balance and effectively buys you time. So an example is if we get really aggressive on monetization, then perhaps, or maybe it ensures that you don't have to consider consolidation until a future date, or at least after legislation passes, or whatever that might be. But the reason it's in here is because I would want the board to understand the more aggressive we are on this, the more time or flexibility it gives you in taking the next step. But it does not fix it. It does not get you to stable state. Is that helpful? All right, thank you. You're good.
So the next slide is talking about other strategies, and most of these here are TBD, and they have a high impact on our scorecard goals. Non-required academic programming, non-required partnerships, enrichment programs, and non-required enrichment programs. So these are just very generic, and we can start talking more in detail, but we just wanted to propose that these are some of the other areas that we're looking at to have reductions.
And when you talk about enrichment programs, are you talking about after-school programs? Are you talking about electives, like non-required academic or things that happen during the school day? This is not extra athletics, arts, that it is, what are we talking about when we talk about enrichment programs?
Yeah, so it could be after-school programs. It could be other programming that is added on to the day through an outside enrichment provider that would not necessarily be an academic program or a partnership, which would fall into one of those other two. So that could be fine arts providers that provide additional services during the classroom time. We would consider that under the enrichment.
But if we're talking about non-foundation school program courses that happen during the day, that would be a non-required academic programming.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think the point we're trying to make here is these have huge impacts to the scorecard and goals. I mean,
And huge impacts to equity and huge impacts to a lot of things, yeah.
and the numbers, I mean, we don't have numbers in here, but you add all these up, they're not going to be huge. Some of them will be larger than others, certainly, but these are not needle movers, is maybe the way I would say it.
Quick clarification. The third line and the fourth line are redundant, right? Enrichment programs and non-required enrichment programs?
We're wondering who's going to find that.
When we were discussing these, we were trying to think of the best language, and so utilizing different language, and accidentally both got left on. But there should have only been one line.
It's an A+.
You get a star.
And so this final report shows our targeted amount, and what we're wanting to show here is the difference between, in the second column, 0% forecast versus 11% property value decline. So if the projected deficit for FY 25-26 with 0% property value growth, we have $105 million, and land sales are approximately $26 million. We have identified strategies of $17.5 million to $20 million. And then we have budget considerations, which are the ones that we just went through in very great detail. Those, if we do all of those, that gives us a total of $25.8 million. So the targeted amount for 25-26 with 0% property value growth, it would mean we would have to have an additional $35.7 million to have a balanced budget, which this would be the pre-budget reduction off the top in this example. It'll be the $35.7 million. If we go to FY 25-26 with the 11% property value decline, the projected deficit is $121 million. Again, you would have the same thing. You'd have land sales of $26 million. We have identified strategies of 17.5. The budget considerations, if we take all of those we just went through on the last few pages, that will total $25.8 million. So we'd have to do the pre-reduction of $51.7 million. So if anything on here changes, if we decide to do more land sales, that reduces the amount that we'd have to do the target amount needed. If we don't do all of the budget considerations, if we decide we don't want to do 7 of 8, you take $16 million out of the 25.8, and that would increase the 35.7 deficit, right? So we still have some movement that we can make, but this target amount needed, this is the amount that we're talking about on the pre-reduction so that we can have a balanced budget for 25-26.
Trustee Hunter.
Is this 11% conservative?
The last percentage she gave us was between 9%, which is Leanna from Travis Central, thank you, Appraisal District. And so she gave us between a property value decline of 9% and 13%. So that's where we went in the middle at 11%. I will say that I went to the city of Austin. They had a budget forum earlier this week, and they're also saying that there will be property value declines.
Well, yes, so I knew that piece, but what I'm saying, So you guys just split the difference,
Yes,
but we could be looking at 13.
we could be looking at 13.
Did you project that?
So I guess, Katrina, my understanding was the range was from, the high-end range was 9 to 13. So I just want to make sure that we're not saying that the range is between 9 and 13.
No, the range is between 9 and 13.
Okay.
And so we split and did 11%.
Okay.
So 0 is not realistic.
Not if her numbers, not if what we're getting from Leanna stays consistent. And we've had 2 meetings now where she said between 9 and 13%. And when we talked to Ed, what did he say his number? Do you remember when we talked to Ed at City of Austin? Did he tell us what they were projecting? Okay, but we've also been meeting with the City of Austin, and we talked to their CFO, Ed, as well. So we just we'll go back and look.
Can I clarify? You said this is if we do everything, but this is not the consolidations.
This is not everything.
This is not the
I
consolidation.
apologize. We should have netted out and actually done that blank because none of them have actually been adopted. But that didn't get in. It was one of my late changes, so I apologize.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure that
Yep, you're exactly right.
we have more on the table than what
That's
is on
exactly
this.
right.
Okay.
And so then I would also say if we did consolidations, that would decrease to 35.7. But also if we did more land sales, that could decrease to 35.7.
Right, okay, that's what I wanted to say, is that we have more options than just
Yes.
two things here. Okay.
Yes.
And this also doesn't include anything from the ledge. Not that I'm betting on it or care about. I mean,
Right,
but
right,
that
right.
just assumes 0.
But the land sales, I just want to be clear because people going to be clamoring to sell everything, right? It's like a fire sale. Everything must go. Those are not long-term solutions.
No.
That's like going to the pawn shop. Those of you who ain't been poor probably don't know how that works. But that's just going to the pawn shop and pawning something that eventually you're going to have to try to get back. And it will be more in the end. So people really need to understand that because we just going to get a bunch of emails saying, sell it all, right? It's not working. That's the temporary fix.
Correct. Yes, it's a temporary infusion of cash, Trustee Hunter, so you're correct. And we still need to make reductions because we still need to leave. So even if next year, if this gets us whole, if we do all of this great work and we get rid of the 35.7, then there's also still, we have to look at 26, 27. So we don't want to do all of this work to become stable for 1 year and be like, yes, and then the next year we pass a deficit budget. We need to make sure that we're going to be stable throughout.
Which is why when we talk about stable state, it's your sources of funding, the true sources, state and federal, have to equal your fixed costs. Like that's just, like generally speaking, that's what it needs to be. Now you're going to you get some rental revenue here, and maybe that can pay for some things. But the true source of how we are funded largely is by funding from the state and also from the federal government. Those two things should equal like 98, 99% of our fixed costs. There really shouldn't be a lot of variance in between the two. And until we get there, we're not going to be, to Trustee Del Dioste's comments, maybe to me personally, like kind of what is safe harbor, like where are we finally not overly exposed? And I want to make sure that we do the work together and thoughtfully, because I know I kind of said it in jest, but if we don't do this, it could be done to us, right? We could get to a point where the risk is so great that intervention's required. Like we're not going to get there. But I just want to be really honest, if not doing something is not an option, which is back to the sense of urgency. Yes, ma'am.
We're saying do something for 2 years, right? We can't just relax this year and then kick it down, kick the can for next year. Oh, thank you. So it needs to be for this fiscal year as well as fiscal year.
And I really want to bring us back to that student outcomes where we're talking about things as we are making progress, as our systems are in good place that are really going to have a profoundly negative effect on our students. And that is, it's our job to kind of do the least harm we can while we're making these cuts. But I think we also really have to name that, partly because of unexpected property value changes, partly because of the unbudgeted expenses and in a huge amount, not just us, but everyone, because we're underfunding our schools. It is having an impact on student outcomes. And what we know how to support our students, and yet we can't do what we need. Going back to the instructional coaches, which we heard about tonight, going back to these resources, which I think is part of, this isn't painful because we don't want to cut things. It's painful because we know the impact of what we're cutting. And I think it's really important to kind of keep coming back to that this isn't a conversation of, oh, I don't want change. This is a conversation about we don't want to make choices, that we have to make hard choices, but we know it's going to impact our kids.
I think I just,
Oh.
you go.
Okay, so, are we kind of like wrapping up, or, okay, so I just have a few, thoughts, okay, so I think, first with the process of like how we go about this, grounding it in student outcomes as President Boswell was talking about, I think one of the best, and thinking about our guiding principles for this whole process. One of them was, including, make sure teacher voice is included in the process. And I would love us, for all of when I think about our scorecard and, the big lever here is our economically disadvantaged Black and Hispanic students primarily. Like if we can support those students and get them to where they need to be, then we're going to be good on our scorecard. And so I'm going to request again, can we gather teachers that actually have moved the needle with that exact population, with our low-income Black and Hispanic students, and get their feedback? Because I think it's going to be hard for me to vote on anything that you ultimately bring to us without having that conversation with teachers. So that's a big thing, just from a process standpoint. I would say, and I don't know if others agree or not, but that's just me speaking for myself. And I would say like another process thing would be like going to the campus consolidations. If we do that, then like, yes, let's do it differently from how we did it a few years ago. And let's at least, I would say if we're going to name some campuses that for consolidations, that happens by December of this calendar year, so that families have enough time, to plan for the following school year, and not just, and obviously, do whatever community engagement we need to do to bring them along. But that is going to be, I know that's going to be a big, heavy lift. But really, if I think about student outcomes and really are disciplined about using that as the lens, there are certain things that stand out to me as like, yeah, we should protect this, or yeah, that's probably an area where we can cut. So, I mean, I think, so I appreciate President Boswell kind of bringing us back to that. I do want to say with the elementary essential areas, I want to learn a little bit more about the impact, because when I talk to teachers, and I haven't talked to the group of teachers that I want to talk to, but just random teachers that come across I'm also hearing the current essential areas design is hurting our students because they don't have enough class time. It's cutting into their teaching time because they're always going to essential areas. And so like, that's just another little information. So it could kind of go both ways. It could actually be a good thing in some campuses to revert to where we were before for student outcomes. Let's see. And just, I would say, like, for the targeted amount, let's be even more conservative here. Let's use that 13% maybe, or like do a 9% and a 13% scenario. And I also really just want to get a sense from the board, like how we feel about the 20% fund balance. And Matthias, are you thinking that like we're going to get to, like, at what year would we be able to get back to that 20% fund balance? Are we thinking like that we wouldn't hit that in the I know we're not going to hit that in the budget we adopt in June. You know, I know we're not going to hit that for this year that we're sitting in right now. You know, for the budget we adopt in June, it would be interesting to see. I think that would be really hard from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it would be. So here's the thing. I think there are a couple of variables that we don't have at this point. I think it's. Sorry. There are a couple of variables that we don't have at this point. Bless you. So this is a lot of, bless you. You know, by June, you could very well have bills passed. I would expect, I mean, you potentially could at this point as quickly as they've been going. So let's say that does happen. You know, that rebaselines, you know, 25, 26, because that would change the sources. And then if we were aggressive on some other areas, conceivably you would, that margin would come close and maybe even eclipse 20%. I don't know. But to say, like, ask me right now,
well,
you know,
like assuming the ledge doesn't do anything to help us, do you see any scenario that we could get to a 20% fund balance in the 26 budget?
I always, so I'll let Katrina answer and then I'll answer, but she's our CFO. So my thought process is.
Yes, so thank you very much, Superintendent Segura. Adriana and I walked out to just talk about that when it was brought up from the dais. We would have to do some work, right? So when we're looking at the target amount here, the 35.7, we'd have to make more reductions than that, or have greater land sales, or have additional funding. It would just be, we'd have to be really, we'd have to calculate that number and then we can present what it is. But there should be strategies that we can make to get us back to 20% in fiscal year 25-26.
Okay.
With some work, Trustee Gonzalez, with some work.
We can show, so it's going to change, but I think we could put together a plan. I just need the board to know it's going to be aggressive on a couple fronts.
I mean, I think it would.
And then we can show, because I always think about, you know, so you just made a comment around, you know, making sure, and we talked about earlier, if we were to go through consolidations, December of 2025 is when the latest you'd ever make that decision, the vote, right? Because you always want to give families the spring of 2026 to start 26, 27. So between now and then, it doesn't seem like that long, but that will consume the entire system to get to that point.
Yeah, I know.
And so to go faster than that can be done, but if you're going to go faster than that, you're kind of taking that big item off the table.
Yeah.
And which means you're looking at forced. So let's say that we sell something, we get super aggressive, we get really creative, we do something, and then we do a forced. We take the 35 million, and you say, Matthias, spread this out across all the divisions. I can do that. You know, and I can come back with a plan and show you what that would look like. Yeah. And that's what I think Katrina's saying. They can be done, but it's gonna be harder.
I see.
So I don't know if that makes any sense, but so I think we can carry multiple
does.
models, and I think every single month we'll have more assumptions become more real than not.
For sure.
On both cases, because right now Katrina our CFO interim, our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Montgomery, only has financials closed out through January. Right, so February, you know, and then you close out February financials. You know how much is left in the non-staff budget accounts. You have thousands of accounts all across the district. If you freeze it and you hold and vacancies hold, then you pick up those months for the remainder. Let's say you're plus, you know, 6% on that difference. That's millions of dollars. So there's just.
It's worth talking about.
Yeah,
you know,
I'd like to. I mean, I think we can show it
and bring our community along so that if we do have to, you know, just protects. It helps us back up whatever decision we have. And then the last thing I just want to mention is, like, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's not on here, and I think it's important to acknowledge. Like, you guys probably had a heart-wrenching time just coming up with this list, so thank you for that. But just know, like, you know, we're not talking about cutting Rosedale. We're not talking about, you know, cutting dual language. Clifton, you know, there's so much that we do that goes above and beyond. And so it might be worthwhile to actually have a list of the stuff that we didn't cut that that does go above and beyond, just so our community knows, like, we're not starting from scratch here. These are,
Yeah.
they're, and maybe we need to, so when people say, oh, don't do this thing, it's like, okay, well, do you want us to do something from this list? Because that's going to be even worse. Like, as Trustee Chu has mentioned before, like, we have to start thinking about this in terms of trade-offs. And, like, people
Well-
need to see the trade-offs that have already been made.
Well, on the dual language comment, the trustees Foster's comment earlier, it's the academic programming. I think all of our programmings are done across the entire district. Like, there's some refinement associated with them, so I don't want to take one off or say one or say the other. I think that there's an opportunity to refine how they're like implemented across the district. So I want to make that clear. That's not exclusively in, it's also not exclusively out, if that makes any sense.
So can I say one other thing? So to Trustee Singh's point, the couple things that we have to stay grounded on and in agreement is, one, do we want a balanced budget? Two, do we want 20% fund balance? And if we want those two things, then what do we have to do to get there? Right? So if we're all in agreement that those are two things that are important to us, then we can talk about how to get the budget there. But those have to be things that we're aligned with.
And do you need an answer from us, right? Like, you want an answer from us tonight on that?
I think I think
Okay.
we're wanting this conversation has been fantastic. And we're coming back in March. We'll be provide updates.
We're gonna have to
along
come
the way.
back and back and back, yeah.
Back and back and back. I think what we've heard enough, I think, to build out models, to know that, to use different tools to get to those marks that Ms. Montgomery just mentioned, and also based on what we heard from the trustees. And I think based on dialogue, kind of know maybe what we should explore first before others, and then build those models out, and I think that's what we'll do.
Okay. And is there a way to give us a real estimate? To me, the fund balance isn't the magic number, it's what that number means. And to me, I'm really uncomfortable if we get to a place where we're gonna have to borrow money to make payroll. Like, to me, that is my floor. And if there's a tiny bit of play that helps get us to another year where we have more opportunities, helps delay, gives us room to talk about consolidations in a thoughtful, collaborative way, whatever that is. If it means a couple of points, and we're not, for example, not, by the end of the year at 20, but we're going to be back at 20 next year. That is my personal threshold. So for what that's worth. And then I have a second question. The things that aren't on here, and I think things that may be close to sacred cows, like a Rosedale, right? Which, but then we haven't talked about increasing class sizes. I know some districts are doing that. Is that a possibility? We haven't talked about one-to-one devices and the costs associated with that. So is there a way where we can kind of ask, and these may be things that you've considered and rejected, but is there a way, and I'm sure we're going to hear from the community as it becomes more and more clear that this is real, ideas. So is there a way to put those kind of into the stream of the conversation? What's the best way to do that?
I send them to us and we'll add them into trustee.
Or tell us you've already been there. I mean, one way or the other.
I think a lot of them we've already been there, but it's also, it's been an evolution of the budgeting process, right? So before the goal line got pushed back further with SHAR, SHAR's alone was a $12 million hit. So, there are things that we explored and we felt like they were probably a ways out. So there are things that we explored and we felt like they were a ways out. And so there wasn't really the need to get into the weeds of how we would implement or what it would actually look like. Now, because the goal has been kind of pushed out a little bit, we can reintroduce them. Y'all are going to have some thoughts that maybe we've considered maybe in a different way. So if you have something, send them our way. We'll show you that we've considered it, or this is what it is when we do consider it. So yeah, please send them our way. I don't want to get to a point where we don't have documentation of at least considering what was brought forward, or at least shared by the board to the administration, if that makes any sense.
I appreciate that. Yep, that makes sense.
Just one quick suggestion along those lines. If you are doing some of those things, I think that would probably be a good opportunity for a different reference point on the effects on student outcomes, because the fact that you're saying, oh, we wouldn't do these, of course, or something to that effect, shows how important they are. And I think that's a good reference because all the things that you've been willing to put on here as an example, even things that you're saying would greatly affect students, those are the ones that you would presumably be presenting as opposed to these other things, shows kind of the relevant, or the relative effect on students.
Because when it's only student outcomes in this scorecard, it doesn't take into account the historically underserved student groups that are served by those programs, campuses, and it's also scale, which I think you brought up, right? So when you look at the, floor, right, allocations for elementary schools, the third row on that first table, that is very few schools, but those are schools that have high percentages of students that are identified as economic disadvantaged, probably some of our higher percentages of students that are Black and brown. So I just, so that lens is not in here, but we use that lens like all the way through, but because of how this is structured, we put it in this format. And it's like the Rosedale is a good example, yes, and it is one of our most vulnerable student groups. And so I think we can do that, we can kind of show what that looks like, but I think that's the lens that we've been using that doesn't show up when you look at scorecard only, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and there might be a better way for me to pose it as a question because that I'll think about outside of this, because it will be helpful in choosing through these and making those decisions to understand all the different, potential lenses of impact.
So maybe we can have a chat and just any ideas you might have, can potentially explore them, because what I would almost like to do is to take all the costs, you remember the bar chart and the presentation that we gave up there that had all the differences of what is funded and then what we spend? Like taking that delta, identify those costs, and then this is what that is, because in there you'll find things that are viewed by many as non-negotiables.
Yeah. And before we wrap up, I have a big ask of our community. We are, we're here through no fault of the community. No one wants to be here. Everyone wants more for our kids and not less. This is not what we want. Without not calling out anything specifically in this budget, this is designed to have us fighting over the crumbs, and we're not going to do that because our families know that we have to protect our kids' future, so we really have to come together to have the best schools, the best experience for our kids and for our kids that will be in the system so that we have a future public school in Austin ISD. So this is the beginning of the conversation. It's not over. And I know this is it's gonna be terrible, but this is really the only place right now that we have a say as Austinites. We don't have a say at what's going on at the federal level. We can go to the Capitol, but we're not planning on seeing what we need. And we certainly are doing the work as Austinites. We saw so many of our families on Monday, and they'll be there tomorrow. We have our Austinites there, so we have to really be democratic about this budget because this has been I've been sick over this, but it really isn't. It's not our budget. We're the ones who approve it, but we represent people, and so we have people that we're going to help, that will help us make the best decisions for kids, and I know that we can do it together, and I'm glad to be. That is it's us making the decision. We're not going to let other people do it for us. It's going to be Austinites.
Yeah. I don't think anybody will care more than us.
That's right.
Which is why it has to be us.
Anything else before we wrap up? Trustee Quintana?
Just really, really quickly. On the dipping below 20%, changing our policies, I am very wary of that because of the precedent it sets for future school boards, and adopting and then changing policies a few years later. And I'm worried about what that goal setting, when you make a policy, you're saying that like, these are our values, this is, we're gonna do everything we can to meet this expectation. And so I'm just worried about, moving the goalpost when we feel like we're not gonna hit it. And so I'm just, and the precedent is that, future boards may or may not, see other things that they want to adjust to move the goalposts to hit their expectations. I know what we were talking about, like everything that's on the table, what you considered, what's left out of here. I would love to see all of the considerations, and I think that went along with what others were saying about, even the things that you said no to, and even things that are left to consider, so that we give our community enough time to look at everything. And I would also love, I don't know how feasible this is, but I would also love to look at how these impacts would look like at different campuses, because we know that our schools do not all look the same. And so I'm wondering how we can go through this process while not cutting things across the board that would impact one school more than the other, because they just have a different student population, or they have, a different teaching, whatever, right? So I would love things to be, I'm hesitant to use the word tailored because that feels like extreme, but I do know that in talking to my campuses that they have different needs. And so I would love to see that considered moving forward. And then a question I get a lot is cutting staff in this building in HQ, and maybe we can add that and talk about that, because I hear that a lot, like, well, why don't we just cut some positions, at Central? And so I don't know what those numbers look like or what the answer is, but I think our community might want to see those. And that's it.
So let me respond to the first part. I think we can do the tailoring to a certain extent. I think campus by campus, it's going to be challenging, but I think we have bands for that reason. We try to group schools that have similar student needs, and they typically have similar size and scale just because of, kind of who they are. So I think the band strategy is probably a good start, and then we can kind of expand from there and see how that might look like. I think on some of these, what might be helpful is an example. What does it look like to, what is an example if you remove the floor for some of the schools that had those additional allocations now, and then if you removed it? Like, I think we can do simple examples to help maybe show our community and the board what that actually looks like. As far as central administration, so this is the one thing that I want to be really kind of honest and clear about, is I don't want this to turn into finger pointing, or like it's finance's problem or Central's problem, or we do the, so there are 73 people less that work at central office now than they did a year ago, and at the same time that number would be a lot higher, but we had to hire staff for special education, and those special education staff are not campus based. And so there's a lot of dynamics in the way that the central allocations work. And if you just look at the number, you could even say, oh, Matthias, like you only, removed 20 positions, but then we just spent, 2 months talking about the fact that we're getting off of these contracts, and the only way I can get off them is by adding LSPs, diagnosticians, and perhaps art facilitators. So we will share all that, but I think the story is the important thing. Like, yes, where we can be efficient, where we can collapse, where we can become, we can still support our campuses and not introduce too much strain in the system. We've explored it, and there's still more to explore. I will agree. I think there's more to explore, but I don't want to leave the space saying that we haven't done a pretty significant reduction already. Because I just think that gets really, really tough. Like we were looking at it today, and we're still the hiring freeze is for everybody except special education staff. So that number is going to increase. And if you net it all out, you could almost argue that, Matthias, you hired staff when you said you were freezing staff. And then that's hard. It's just hard, it's just hard to do that. But I can share that, Trustee Quintana, because I think it is important to know, and then also go back, which is why we try to show the administrative cost ratio, which is an indicator that the state uses to determine kind of what percent of funds are being used to support central administration functions versus campus. And so before we were above the line, which would tell you that we were heavy. Now being pretty well below the line is a really good indicator that we're pretty lean, but I think there's still some work to do. So let me think about how to provide that, but I think it's a good point.
I really appreciate President Boswell lifting up in so many words, and others as well, that our context is a context of continual improvement for the last several years, and we've become more efficient, and we've become leaner, and we've become better in many respects. And so this, is a blow to the work in certain respects, and so it's just worthy of lifting up. To Trustee Quintana's point, it is worth, I guess, lifting up and relifting up that our number one guardrail was ensure cuts in any area are equity driven, and I think that goes exactly to the point that's being raised about what's the impact of different things on different campuses. And I have faith in y'all and us as a collective that we're going to need that, and we're going to need that just to get it right. And then the final comment is, as we talk about lifting up the things that we have committed to, that we do that are not required strictly by the state, I think it's worth remembering that with the transparency comes a need for real sophistication in communications, because the last time we listed stuff, it kind of turned into, oh my gosh, these things are on the chopping blocks. And so somewhere along the way between, there has to be a real nuance to our comms, our communications around this is what we do, because last time it immediately turned into they're putting this on the chopping block. At least that's what I kept hearing. But I do want the transparency, and I do appreciate, and I think it's good strategy to lift up the full list, but tactically, how do we do it is going to require a lot of good work, and we're getting into, and we all know it, but it's worth lifting up again and again, to Trustee Whitley Chu's point, or what's implied under the point. As it gets dicier, people are going to get edgier and edgier. We're all going to get edgier as things get closer to, aspects of the process that we really hold dear. And so our communications are going to have to be so crisp, so good. All of us, all of us.
Yeah, so that is something we've been thinking about quite a bit, and actually I think that is also true for internal communication. So one of the things that we've realized over the last month, as we've been navigating the ever-changing landscape around us, both at the state level and at the federal level, is the time that we leave board meetings are very, very important to the workflow of just a system. So we have a board meeting, inputs or ideas come, help provide direction to the administration. The administration comes together on Friday, thinks about different strategies to deploy. Monday, there's a senior leadership meeting. Monday to Tuesday, and then Monday to Tuesday, there's a conversation with executive directors. Executive directors then turn around and tell principals on Wednesday. And so by the time it gets to campuses, sometimes it's 5 days removed or 4 days removed from, kind of where we are. And the next thing's already happened, right? We're working through it. So after meeting with principals last Wednesday, and after having a lot of conversations with folks, we're going to move to a weekly, almost like kind of pandemic type of communication strategy we can see what that looks like externally, where every Friday we'll be having meetings with all of our principals, and at the appropriate times doing district-wide communication like we did 2 weeks ago regarding some protocols we wanted to make sure were implemented across the district. So I agree with you 100%, and I think these times with everything going on just requires like free flow communication. It's just got to be moving all the time, and that's just going to mean, putting the time aside, seeing who can get on, and then letting it disseminate. So your points are well taken, and I just wanted you to know that we've already committed to that, and the first one's tomorrow.
All right, anything more? Okay, we have more open session, a little bit more open, closed session, a little bit, not much, and my script is here. So, here we go. Maybe in a minute. Okay, we will now recess the open meeting again at 11:35 p.m. and move to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code Sections 551.074, 551.072, 551.073, 551.087, 551.076, 551.0821, and 551.071. And when we are finished with executive session, we will return to the open meeting to close the meeting. Thank you. Okay. Secretary Gonzalez, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
The meeting is adjourned at 12:55 a.m. Thank you.